Well, hi. Brienne, I've got to tell you right off the bat that this feels kind of like an anticlimactic live stream.
Yeah.
Because the last two we had were on Christmas Day and then New Year's Day.
Oh, I didn't even think about them
Yeah.
being like that back to back.
Yeah,
That
Christmas
is
Day,
true.
New Year's Day, and then it's like, well, hey, everybody, happy
This
first
is-
8th day of the year.
First, yeah. You
I really,
can't even say first live stream of January.
yeah, I know, because that was last
It was
week. I
New
know,
Year's
it's,
Day. Well,
yeah.
welcome back to the regular swing of things.
Welcome back to the regular swing of things. This is Now Let's Be Honest. If you're here, be sure to say hello in the live chat because we would love to greet you and say hello as we get started with this. We're going to start talking about the episode of The Chosen very shortly, and we're going to get into spoiler territory just a little bit after that.
Yeah.
But be sure to say hello and go down there. I know that we've already seen some people here down below, but I want to make sure first off that you can hear us and that we're live and that you can actually process what we're saying. That's mainly why I like to see that. But Brienne, tell us a little bit about your day so far.
My day's been good. The weather has been awesome. And so I got to spend time outside reading my Bible before our discipleship group. So that was nice.
Yes.
I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, we actually got to so we went to church today.
Yes.
And that was great.
Yeah.
Great sermon. And then after the sermon, we went and worked out with one of our friends. After that, we left, went back to my house for a little bit, and then we went back to the park. You read 1 Thessalonians, and I had already done that because, I was on top of things.
You did the day before.
I did it yesterday. And then I went for another run, and then we came back here to discipleship group. We watched The Chosen as a discipleship group, and then here we are to now hang out with y'all. Been a busy day. Sundays are long days.
They are long days.
Long days. But you know what? We're here,
Rewarding.
and we're going to get through it. We do have two people saying hello. Hello, Nostalgamation. That's a cool name. Cool. It's the first video of yours this year I've gotten to watch live. There you go. That is our hook for today. This is the very first video where Vampire Bloodthirst has gotten to watch us live. So there you go. That is the exciting thing. Hello from Altamonte Springs, Florida. Yes, we can hear you. Good. That is the main thing. If you can't hear us, then that would just be very sad because we would just be talking here for no reason whatsoever. It's cold here in Michigan, but at least it's not snowing. Yeah, it's not cold here. I'm in Texas.
No.
So it's not. It's actually
ripe 68 degrees.
Yes, it was actually like perfect weather today. Like today was mwah. It's been like Texas weather's all over the place. It gets like super warm and then super cold and just goes back and forth.
Yeah.
But today was great. It was storming last night and into this morning, but then it just cleared up and it was just a great day to be outside. But apparently in Ontario, it's also very, very cold. All right. Well, while y'all are still getting in the live chat and saying hello, Brienne, give me your initial thoughts. Oh, also, before we do that, I do want to let you know that I was very hungry while we were watching this episode. And so I made mac and cheese and I have not finished it yet. And rather than being a professional and just eating it quickly before the live stream, or rather than using self-control and waiting till afterwards, I figured that I would just eat with y'all because Jesus did that in the episode and he broke his fast with his disciples, and he clarifies that he wasn't actually breaking a fast. It had just been a little bit since he'd eaten. And so I'm gonna eat with y'all. I'm sorry, it might be unprofessional, but I'm hungry.
To the microphone so that way it doesn't turn to an ASMR channel.
Yeah, I'm not gonna like lean in here and I'm not gonna do any of that. Dwayne Smith says that he is watching us and the Snipe Life at the same time. Talk about
is impressive.
Efficiency.
Now that is what you call multitasking.
Yeah, just like get got an iPad and a phone and like get one earbud over here, one earbud over here, and just like that. Yeah, that's impressive. Good for you. That's quite impressive. All right, so Brienne, let us know, what did you think about the episode? Try to stay out of spoiler territory right off the bat.
Okay. I really liked it. I thought it was good. Compared to last episode, I think that it was like, for me at least, I think it was like more honed in of an episode to where they had different plot lines going on, but I feel like it covered less stuff. And so we got more stuff in detail, which I enjoyed. And then there's also more biblical moments too. And so that's fun because I like seeing how they carry those out. So
yeah. Those are my favorite parts of the show, which I mean, I know obviously we're supposed to be invested. Oh gosh. Sorry, I put Rotel in here. It's kind of spicy and whoo. Okay, that's kind of caught me off guard. I know obviously we're supposed to be watching the show just for the storylines, but I can't help it. Like, I love seeing Bible stuff adapted to the screen.
I mean, it's a biblical show, so it makes sense.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
But I think that this episode was better in my opinion than the last episode was. The last episode, I think there were just some issues chronologically speaking, just like certain things that it felt a little more jumbled to me. I felt like it was the weakest of this season for sure, and I don't know where I would rank it with all the episodes, but this episode I thought was actually really good. I thought there was some really positive stuff in there and some good things that I think they're gonna be like. You can see like some of the stuff that they're layering in there for the episodes to come, and I'm excited to see what else they got in store for this. There's also some really cool cinematic stuff in this episode that I really like. Just I always like the artistic choices they do, and almost every episode there's at least like one thing where they're trying something artistically different, which I just think is really nice, and I just kind of like that.
I also think there was some good application points in this one that were easy to find too.
Well, there you go. I don't even know what you're talking about, but I guess we'll talk about them as we go through it. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, I'm excited to hear what you have to say. We got here. Let's see. Tim Staton says the best series by far and the best episode by far.
There we go.
I've seen a few people saying that. I don't know. I can't make a judgment call like that so quickly. I've got to like slow down and think about it before I can like say like favorite episode. I was able to say that about episode 3. Like I still think that I liked episode 3 even more, but that's mainly just because it was a lot slower paced, and I really like character study stuff. Like in episode 3, it was just like a character study of Jesus and of Nazareth, and I really like that. But who knows? Maybe this one, upon further reflection, will take that spot. I don't know, but I really can't just hop in there, like hop in there, do that. Hey, Tim Staton, his was 5E. I'm not sure what that means.
I don't know.
Okay, cool. Well, I guess we can probably just hop in and start doing the spoiler talk, huh?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. Well, I want to eat a little bit more real quick. Would you like to kind of just kick us off and start describing what we have right off that? Let me get the spoiler banner on here.
Yeah.
And Brienne, tell us what happened at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah, so before the actual episode started, they put up like a disclaimer screen on the when you're watching it. Just saying that there might be like some sensitive things, and that is really for like the very first scene that comes into play whenever it starts. And it is, you don't really know who it is at first. There's like these two women, they're walking in the middle of the night, and you can tell that, like one of the ladies is having to support the other person as they're walking down. You can tell like she's distressed as whatever's going on. They come knocking on the door, and they come like barging in the door, and it happens to be that she's having like she's bleeding, and then she ends up having a miscarriage. And then right before the end of the scene, we see the lady who's laying down and she's having the miscarriage look up, and it happens to be Eden. And it's set 2 weeks before the last thing that we saw in the previous episode, and so we see that that's Eden, and that kind of explains some of the issues that are going on that we've seen set up in some of the like the previous episodes between kind of her and Simon, and just kind of how she's been acting and stuff like that. And so it kind of ties loose strings together. Yeah,
so we actually get an answer for why has Eden been acting so strange and weird. And this was something that fans had been theorizing about for a bit, mainly because there was one scene in the trailer where for the trailer for the show where you see her going into a mikvah where she's like cleansing herself, and she seems very emotional. And then we know that there's going to be a lot of stuff between her and Simon, and people were thinking, well, this could revolve around a miscarriage, which it did.
Yeah.
And this was something that Dallas had posted about. I had seen on Facebook a few days ago or something like that, where he said, hey, just an FYI, viewer discretion advised. And I personally didn't think that the scene was, obviously I don't have any kids or anything, but it was mainly like saying for like, in general, just people need to be wary of it. And specifically if you've got kids or something, just, you know, maybe watch it first. And I don't have any kids, but I personally thought that it was, it wasn't too graphic or anything like that. But I do see like, if you have a kid, maybe, you'd be just depends on if you want to have that conversation and explain quite what was going on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're going to have to, we'll probably save some of the Simon and Eden talk in regards to how the emotional weight of that later on, because there's going to be like a brief interaction with Simon and, where they're actually around each other and still struggling with that. But yeah, so what did you think about like just Eden's reaction? Like now that we know for sure what she went through, obviously it's a heartbreaking thing. And this actually, to me, is actually fairly relevant because I've had a lot of people, just different people within like the last few months and stuff who I've known who have had, well, maybe not last few months, maybe it was really
within the past year.
Yeah, within the past year. A lot of people who are really close to us who've had a series of miscarriages. And to be fair to Eden, kind of like her, they've had a difficult time sharing it with people.
Yeah, it's a sensitive thing.
Yeah, which is kind of sad because that's just something where I think that as a church we need to be better at that being a more public and open thing. Because for some reason people find it hard to share about things like that. But it's a death, it's like a death in the family. But we, like whenever my dad died, I wasn't like afraid to tell people. Like, no, it's like I need to tell people because I need people to help me, like, grieve. But for some reason, when miscarriages, we feel like we have to suffer through that alone, which is sad to me. And I think that's why they're addressing it this way.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they're trying to demonstrate Eden going through. But what are your thoughts about her response and just stuff like that?
Yeah, I definitely think it makes more sense because before I was kind of confused as to, I guess, what she was holding back from Simon. And I could see how there were, faults on both sides for both of them, but I was kind of confused as to like what it was because we didn't really know. And now that the first scene, that clears a lot of things up. But it makes me really sad that she like can't share it with him, especially because it's her husband. And so whenever I see that, there's just like I feel this very heavy weight just to think about the idea of what could possibly be going through her head and just like what she's experiencing to where she feels so uncomfortable she can't even share with her own husband. And that makes me really sad.
Yeah. And I think for me the difficulty of it all was we still don't know exactly how long the disciples were gone.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's what made it more difficult for me because I had a feeling a miscarriage was coming, but I didn't think they had been gone long enough for that to happen. I mean, like I've talked about this on the channel where it seems like if they're strictly following like the timeline of the Jewish calendar, it's been like what 9 months or 11 months since halfway through season 2 to halfway through season 3. It's been at least 11 months, but we don't know around what time it was when Jesus sent them out, and we don't know around what time it was that Jesus sent them back, like whenever they came back. We just know that while they were gone, Rosh Hashanah happened, which is during September. So that was my main issue, is we didn't know how long they'd been gone, and to me, it seemed like they hadn't been gone a super long time, because the only thing that we know Jesus did was that he went down to Nazareth. He was there for literally like, what, 2 days? And then he left, and we don't really know anything else he's been up to during this time, so we just don't know how long it's been. And so to me, I thought she was just wanting to announce that she was pregnant.
That's what I thought.
And I thought the miscarriage was going to come later on.
So did I.
And so I guess just more time has passed, because that was one thing I was trying to figure out. It seemed like it was supposed to suggest that she was like we've obviously don't know the full details, but I couldn't tell if she was supposed to be like giving birth, and then like it was almost like maybe more stillborn than just a miscarriage.
That's what,
because it seemed like she was fully aware, like there was a baby there. So I mean, given Jewish stuff back then, I mean, a significant amount of time had to have passed. Probably more time than more time than we would have nowadays, because nowadays we would know sooner than they would back then. So more time would have had to have passed. She would have to know it's a baby. It seems like, I'm assuming the woman with her was like a midwife. So I'm assuming that she was supposed to be giving birth, and then like there were complications, and that's why they're dragging her through there. So I don't really know. Like, that's what I'm saying, because that means that it's been about 9 months, and that's a long time to be gone. But it would track with some of the timeline stuff. I just wasn't sure how long they'd been gone for that to have happened. But I mean, really, a miscarriage could happen anywhere along the way. That was just it was interesting. But her reaction, we'll talk about that more later on. But I just thought it was it's interesting. I mean, it's heartbreaking to go through that, and I do know it's difficult just because some of the people who we know, like they told us about one of them, and then it was only later on that we learned that they'd had multiple miscarriages, and we're like, oh wow, that's heartbreaking. That they felt like they really couldn't share that. But so it's kind of, it's nice to know at least where she's coming from, and they bookend the episode well, because she's the first person we end up seeing in this episode, and she's the last at the end. And so then we cut to the opening credits. But real quick, let me just look through here. Just for the sake of time, I'm probably not going to put every single comment on the screen. I'm just going to kind of read through some of them and just see if there's anything I really want to address here. Let's see. The miscarriage scene was intense. It was very intense. It was filmed really well too, and I think that the reveal that it was Eden was a nice little.
You didn't know from the beginning.
I mean, obviously, if you've been following like the fan theories and stuff, you knew probably right off the bat who it was. But they did a really good job of like just giving you brief glimpses, and like even whenever you did see her, she was like sideways, where you're like, who is that? Like you really couldn't tell, and then finally she like looks up, and it was a good reveal, and the acting was really well done too.
Oh yes.
When I asked some people from Facebook who saw the live stream a day early, they said it was the best episode of the season 3. Yeah, a lot of people seem to be saying that. That's cool. So by 2 weeks earlier, does this explain the timeline where this is 2 weeks earlier before the 2x2? No, this was 2 weeks earlier prior to the episode currently.
Yeah.
So whenever Simon and them come back, she is 2 weeks removed from this. And so it's still pretty fresh on her mind, but time has passed,
Yeah.
right? And so I would say that they had to have been gone for what? Anywhere between like 3 to 9 months ish. Just in order for all of that to have gone down like that. Yeah. So, but that was 2 weeks prior to the episode currently taking place. Yeah, it would also be triggering for those who had a miscarriage. I think they were mainly targeting children though, because like you pointed out, if it was specifically about worrying about those type of women, they would have specified specifically what it was. I think it was more like, hey, just watch this so that you won't have a weird conversation with your kids. Let's see. I like this episode, but I might have a brother or sister in heaven for my mom having a miscarriage, as well as a brother who only lived 18, so he didn't enjoy it as much because of that. Yeah, I mean, to me, I think there's kind of something comforting about knowing, like, whenever you see something heart-aching in a show that you identify with, I've always kind of enjoyed that. Like, whenever there's like a sad or heartbreaking moment, like, yeah, it brings up sad memories, but at the same time, it's like, oh, like, that's just part of human existence, and we all go through stuff like that for sure. The woman with her was her mother. Oh, that would make sense. It would be her, her Ema. But which could have also been the midwife.
I think she might have said that after. Like, I think she might have said Ema after, whenever she was laying there afterwards, but you couldn't really hear that much because of music and stuff. But I feel like I somewhat remember her saying that whenever she, like, her mom put her head on Ema's head. I'm pretty sure, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Dwayne has a question for you, Brienne.
Brienne, has David been a time chronological nerd? Indeed he has, and y'all only know a slight little part of it. You have no idea how many Word documents and Excel spreadsheets he has.
I have a lot.
He does. He has a lot, but he puts a lot of work into it, and it's cool. I like it.
I literally have so many spreadsheets for so much chronology stuff. I mean,
he's the fact checker. I can ask him a question, and he's like, "Let me pull up my Excel spreadsheet for that."
Y'all are impressed by my chronology stuff for like the show. I mean, this is a TV show, guys. I mean, I've got so many things just for like the Bible, like just so many things like I have been working through for so long.
Lots of passion projects.
Yeah. Also, real quick. Okay, we are going to get back into the episode. I'm going to try to like only look at the comments every now and then because we do want to get through this a little bit quicker than last live stream. But we do have another question that Brienne could probably answer better than I could. Oh, wait, that's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. A new comment came in. Sorry. There you go.
What is the Hebrew word behind you guys? Oh, yes. This right here is the word hesed. So we started a hesed series on the channel. And, oh, it's backwards when I tilt it. Okay. Because I was tilting it this way and I meant it to go that way. So I painted this for David for him to have it on his shelf for our Hesed series where we walk through all of the occurrences of Hesed throughout the Bible.
Yep.
And so, yeah, that's what this is.
Yep. Hebrew word Hesed, steadfast love, loving kindness.
Yes.
For his Hesed endures forever. Yeah. My favorite word in the entire world. She made it for me because she is amazing. All right. So moving on, we go through the opening credits and we pick up and we go from one dying child to another, right? So once again, like they do really good at stuff like this.
Yes.
And we see Jairus's daughter, and we see that she cannot be healed because her heart is too weak. And basically, it's a lose-lose situation, and that's going to set in motion the entire rest of the episode. The doctor says that arrangements need to be made, and he points out that there's a minimum of 2 flutes and 1 wailing woman that people typically need to hire in order to have a proper funeral celebration. And this is something that I'll break this down more in depth when it comes to our Is It Biblical series, but this is just something that culturally over here in like America and stuff, we don't understand. But even in some Eastern cultures, they still do this. But they would literally hire professional mourners. And they even talk about that later on where the people are like, hey, we're getting paid for this. Because you would have these people who they were not necessarily invested in this family or anything like that, but it would literally be like, the cultures understood that there was something about human nature that required, like, there's something comforting about suffering and grieving in community. And so they would literally hire people to attend like funerals and stuff and cry and weep and play dirges and music to help families mourn. It's kind of an interesting and kind of weird thing. I don't know if I left this comment on there. I don't know how much I like it, but it's interesting. And we do see that showing up again in the story of Jesus and Lazarus. There's a lot of similarities between this story that we see in this episode and the story of Jesus and Lazarus. But there were mourners and weepers, stuff like that, who would be hired. And so that's what that guy's talking about. But Jairus says that he doesn't want them to make any accommodations like that because he is dead set. That was that was an unfortunate pun.
Yeah.
That was unintentional, kind of probably not the best taste. He's dead set in the idea that his daughter is not going to die. He says, "Don't make any accommodations. I'll be back."
Yes.
And so he leaves.
Yeah.
And we already know what his goal is, right?
We're like, okay, here we go.
I'm a big Jairus fan. Like, honestly,
yes.
I just want a shirt
I do.
that just says Team Jairus on it and has like an
Jairus.
outline of his face, because he is one of my favorite characters on the show thus far.
Yeah.
I just love him. Like, I wasn't expecting to, but for some reason, like in these episodes, he has just made a big impact on me, and I'm just a big, big fan of Jairus.
I do. I like him.
Yeah, and so then we cut to Simon and Eden. And this is where maybe we could talk a little bit about their interactions here. Yeah. Because Simon is standing there and he's packing his lunch. It's kind of weird. He's like stacking like apples and pita bread, like back and forth. Yeah. And his way of stacking it, I guess it was like,
he puts the apples first and then the bread.
Yeah, it was kind of strange. I mean, probably not stuff you're supposed to be paying attention to.
No, but I noticed
But
it.
I think the main reason I noticed it is because if Eden had been packing his lunch for him, I can guarantee you it would have been like
much neater.
But us guys don't care. We're just like, no, just wrap it up. But he's also distracted because he can tell that she is not happy with him, but he still doesn't know why. And so he tries to leave, and then he turns away, and he's trying his best. And he says, "Whatever it is, you're right. I am sorry." And he's taking Gaius' advice, but she's like, "Do you even know what you did wrong?" And he's like, "No, I don't know, but whatever it is, I'm sorry." And then she just doesn't even respond. She just turns away. And so this is where I actually wanted to just take some time and just ask you, like, what do you think about Eden's reaction and how she's handling all this?
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about it a little bit separate from the miscarriage thing itself, because that's more of a sensitive issue. Whereas right here, we can just actually talk about their interplay and what you think and whose side you're taking. And...
well, I know. Okay, so first, I'm just saying something first because Simon is the first one to talk. But I know that he's just taking Gaius' advice, but he definitely did not deliver it very well.
Yeah.
I would probably just don't say that at all.
Yeah.
Maybe just like say something else. Just don't say that at all. But it makes me sad that because he genuinely doesn't know what's going on. Like he came back and he has no idea what's going on. Now there's still like communication issues, I think, that are going on there. Where he could ask more questions or say something. But also, I wish that Eden would just kind of say something to him, because that would solve a lot of the issues if she was able to just say something. Maybe not necessarily like come out and just say all of it, but if she could just say like something to start the conversation and see that her husband would be there to support her. Yeah. Because Simon hasn't proven to be someone who wouldn't be there to support her. And so, once the conversation started and stuff, that he would be there. Yeah. And so I wish he would just say something. Yeah.
Well, no, I feel really bad for Simon in this. And it's not just because I'm a guy. It's like, because Simon, he's not necessarily handling things the best way, but I don't know what he could do better necessarily. Because, like, he has asked her what the issue is, and she just hasn't explained it. So, like, it's not that he's just, like, ignoring it. And, like, whenever he's saying Gaius' words, it's not because he's just, like, trying to apologize for nothing. Like, he genuinely doesn't know what to say, and he's like, well, I don't have anything else to do. I guess I'll just say Gaius' words and see if it helps. And yes, he probably should have had the foresight to, like, hold that back, and even Gaius tells him that later. But I'm like, I don't really know what he could do. Honestly, it seems like really the best thing he could have done is just, like, pull her in and hug her. But that still wouldn't resolve anything, right? Because he still wouldn't know what the issue is. It seems like he probably needs to pick up on the fact that she just needs to be comforted. But even if he did pull her in and hug her, I'm not totally confident that she wouldn't just push him away.
Yeah, I would.
And so, I don't know what he could do. Like the last episode, whenever I thought that it was like more of like just like her wanting to announce a pregnancy, I thought the issue was maybe like him just like moving too fast and not slowing down enough to like actually hear her out. Yeah. But now looking at it, now that we know more of the details, I'm like, I don't he's really in a lose-lose situation.
There's nowhere for him to guess that situation.
Yeah. Well, and even at the end of the last episode, by the time like they started kind of having a shouting match, that's when I started taking more of his side. So I was like, well, like, Eden, you're not giving him a chance. Like, I mean, he's asking and you're not telling him. Because like even last episode, she was saying it's not about what you did, it's about what you didn't do. It's like, what did he not do?
Right. Yeah.
Like he came home and he was telling you about like he literally just had like the most mind-blowing experience of his life. Like, yeah, I mean, he wants to tell you about, like, he literally healed people and did, like, yeah, you'd probably come home and do that. But yeah, I really don't know what Simon's supposed to do in a situation like this. Like, I get that Eden's situation is very heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's hard. Like, you're like, I don't know. Like, Eden, I'm sorry, but come on. Like, you need to communicate this to your husband. Like, if you can't talk to your husband, that's not good.
Yeah.
Like, you should be able to at least talk to him.
Well, also, and the situation is very heartbreaking, but it'll help you a lot if you can bear that burden with someone else.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's still going to be heartbreaking, but you're able to share in that sorrow with somebody else, and especially with it being your husband. That would make sense.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and I feel bad for her because at the end of the episode, and we're going to get there eventually as well, but, like, you see her looking at them, and she's like, you can tell that she's conflicted, and, like, I could be reading too much into this, but she just looks like she feels almost like so alone, and like nobody notices her.
Yeah.
But it's like, in a way, she hasn't let anybody in. You know what I mean? Like, she's looking at them like, oh, like, you know, like, they're over there having fun and I'm over here suffering all alone. I'm like, yeah, but you haven't told anybody. Like, like, if Simon knew what was going on, he would be, like, I can guarantee you, he wouldn't be out there playing chicken with the boys. He'd be hanging out with you, and he'd be trying to deal with that together. He just doesn't know. And, like, that's where I'm like, I feel so bad, because I'm like, I get what she's going through. Yeah. But, like, you can't be mad at somebody over something that they genuinely would have no way of knowing. Yeah. Because it's like, if he's been gone that long, he didn't know she was pregnant. Yeah. He would have no way of knowing any of this stuff. Right. And that's why it's like, I feel kind of bad, because it seems like genuinely, like, just communicate. Like, and I know it's difficult, but ignoring it is going to make it more difficult in the long run. And now your marriage is suffering because you're unwilling to share this very important thing with your husband. But then you're mad at him. I'm like, well, you can't be mad at him. Like, come on. But it's also very realistic, because I can guarantee you that, like, this isn't just like a fictional contrivance. Like, I've seen TV shows do much less realistic things to cause drama between relationships. Like, this is a realistic thing. It's just, it is kind of frustrating. Yeah.
It's a difficult subject.
Yeah. But anyways, let's move on. We get to a scene with in the Zebedee household where we have John and James, and they're just building conflict between them. And also, The Chosen commented on our live stream from last week, and they mentioned that whenever they're in the synagogue and Zebedee's looking at them, he's noticing that there's, like, tension between them. Like, that's what was going on. Whereas I thought, like, we were interpreting it as them just being, like, extra focused, but he was perceiving that there was something going on between the two of them. Yeah. And we see that tension once again building up, and I'm wondering where it's heading. I'm wondering what they're really doing with that there. I think they're just trying to show, like, the power dynamics and just the difficulties of that. But I don't really know where they're heading with that storyline. That's probably the one I'm least invested in so far, because I haven't really been given a reason to care. And also, they keep talking about John and Thomas's budding relationship, but Thomas has been, like, gone for the last few episodes. And the only thing that we've seen of John and Thomas's relationship is really just, like, the little handshake thing, if you have, like, back in episode 1. Yeah. And so, yeah, but we see that continued tension there. Zebedee comes in. He reveals that he sold his boat, which is what we saw in the last episode. Yeah. Big shift. Yeah. And then they have this conversation where he explains, like, basically their family history, and talks about how his dad raised him to be a fisherman, and his dad died waiting for the Messiah. And then he raised his children to be a fisherman, and he's reached old age waiting for the Messiah. But now the Messiah is here, and his children have found a genuine job, right? Like, they don't have to be fishermen. Their family's well off enough, like, they're good. Like, because he turned his father's boats into a fleet, and he's like, I'm successful, I'm fine. And now that y'all have gotten y'all's actual job because the Messiah has chosen you to be his disciples, I'm gonna try something different. And so he's like, I'm gonna go buy an olive grove. Yeah. What do you think about, like, what do you think about that whole storyline that they're developing there?
I think it's kind of cool. I feel like it's really bold for him to just, like, completely sell everything and be like, I'm gonna go buy an olive grove and we're gonna make olive oil. But I mean, go him. Like, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, and it seems like he's doing it, like, he's still confident enough, like it didn't feel like he was saying it as much of a sacrifice.
It's not like a rash decision or something. Yeah. It's not.
Yeah. But it seems like he was just like, I want to try something different. Like, okay. Cool. I mean, all right, Dad. It's just like, awesome. Yeah. And then we move on to another scene. And we have Thad and Nathaniel, and they're carrying water. And I guess that I'm presuming that they just went, like, basically, since the whole cistern thing's down, they went somewhere else to get water, either to the well, or maybe they've heard about the spring or something. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, because they come across Veronica as they're going here. And this is something that actually kind of confused me, because whenever they're walking and they're talking, Thad and Nathaniel, I think it's Nathaniel who asks Thad, where he says,
Yes.
do you think that Simon Z still thinks about killing people, even though he's no longer a zealot? And then they started talking about this whole thing, like, oh, you say a lot of things, like, you talk so much. And Nathaniel's like, I only say the things that I think are important. I don't say, like, all the weird stuff. And they talk, they just go back and forth. And then, this is where I started getting confused. Because Thad says, anyways, why did you bring up the thing about Simon Z? And then Nathaniel responds by saying he saw Simon talking with a Roman, and that's what got him thinking about it. And I could have just misinterpreted stuff, but when he's talking about Simon talking about the Roman, he's not talking about Simon Z. He's talking about like Simon talking with Roman, like Gaius.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
But so I was trying to figure out what the association was with him seeing Simon talking to the Roman versus Z talking, like, wanting to kill people. Because the conversation they had afterwards is like, do people change, I guess? And so I guess it's because back in season 1, Simon did interact with Romans and like formed kind of like a deal. And so I guess that's what they were wrestling through there.
I guess.
The connection just wasn't totally clear for me.
Okay, I see.
Like, you know what I mean? Because it was like, he said, like, why did you ask about Z? And he said, well, I saw Simon talking with the Roman, and I immediately thought he was talking about Simon Z.
Z, yeah.
And I was like, well, when was Z talking to a Roman? Like, that'd be kind of weird.
Yeah.
Because then they said, oh, why would he, do you think he'd betray us? And I was like, why would Z betray us? He hates Romans. And so it took me a while to understand because both their names are Simon.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, they're talking about like Simon, like, Peter. His name's not Peter yet in the show. And I was like, oh, they're talking about like him talking with Gaius. I was like, okay. But like, I guess that they're just saying like, okay, well, Simon used to talk with Romans to betray his people, which I guess Nathaniel has heard about. And therefore he's like, okay, well, if Simon's going back to his old ways, would Z go back to that? Is that the connection that they were going for there?
I guess so. That's the best guess I would have. Okay. That would make sense.
Yeah, because I was trying to make that connection, and it took me a while, mainly because the first half of the conversation I was thinking they were still talking about Z.
Yeah.
But they just never call him Simon, I guess. I don't know.
Would think.
It's kind of confusing to me. But then as they keep walking, they eventually see blood, and I don't know what they were expecting, but they start like tracking it.
I thought that was very bold of them.
Yeah.
To go around tracking. Like,
well, yeah, especially
if I saw that, I'd be like, I'm gonna walk the other direction now.
Yeah.
Like,
well, especially out in the wilderness, because you never know what you're gonna find. I thought they were gonna like walk around, like see like a wild hog or something like that, just gonna like bore them.
I thought Simon Z was gonna be out there,
like, killing somebody.
Like they said that, and I was like, did they just set that up with that? Like them talking with Simon Z go back and kill people? I was like, there's no way they're doing this right now.
Oh, that's funny. See, I immediately knew what it was. Like, I was like, oh, they're probably gonna come across Veronica, but that is a funnier scene. Like, if you think Zeke still thinks about killing people, they walk around the corner and he's like stabbing someone. Now
I didn't think that was actually gonna happen.
Yeah, that would have been wild.
The first thing that came to my brain, because that's what they were just talking about, and I was like, oh, there's no way.
Oh, man.
Anyways, that's beyond the point.
That would have been wild. Like, that would have just totally changed the whole episode. Wow, that would have been.
Shows in order.
Yeah, that would have been funny. But yeah, so they come across Veronica, and she's asleep at first, and it's like you tell her about to touch her, and then Daniel's like, "Is she dead?" Because Daniel's very blunt.
See, and you couldn't see her face. Person laying on the ground. Thought Simon Z killed him.
Well, I know. Well, and especially because like it looked like Thad was about to like touch her, and Jewish law, you don't touch a dead body.
I know, that's what I was thinking.
So
I was like, you're not about to touch her, are you?
Yeah, and maybe that's why Nathaniel's like, is she dead? Because like, hey, dude, like maybe don't. But also like, you also just really don't randomly just touch strangers. Like maybe just walk around and see if you can see them first. But yeah, so they meet Veronica, and she kind of like, they have this back and forth, and they explain that they have a rabbi who is a doctor, but he's a different kind of doctor, right? Which I kind of like that. Like, it's the idea of him being a physician and stuff. Like they keep going back to that, and that's actually been like a theme throughout this whole season, right? Because in episode 3 you had him saying like the physician heal yourself line, and that's what the episode was called. And then episodes 4 and 5 are called clean, and so you really do have this theme of Jesus being a doctor and a healer throughout this whole season, which is kind of cool. And then she initially like turns them away and says, no, I don't want anything. But then she's like, wait, hold up. Is this like the rabbi I've been hearing about? Like, is this the one who healed the guy at the pool? Yeah. Right. Because we learned that that's where she heard about Jesus, which is interesting because that means that she was down in Jerusalem at the pool of Siloam, unless this guy went up to her, but down in Jerusalem. Then she went back to Caesarea Philippi, I guess, or she's been wandering around for a while. I don't know. But she eventually made it back to Galilee and everything.
I think in one of the previous episodes, she had talked about how she'd been traveling.
Yeah.
So that makes
so
tie those together.
Yeah, because she had been, I guess, kicked out of her household and renounced by her family and everything. Yeah, that's kind of stinks.
It is sad.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I mean, poor girl. So she is excited once she learns that they're talking about Jesus, and she mentions that if she could just touch his garment, she could be healed. And Nathaniel's like, that's just a superstition. Like, come on, like that's not gonna happen. Yeah, but she's like, no, it's gonna happen. And so they agree to kind of accompany her, which I really kind of like this, because historically speaking, men and women probably wouldn't interact like this.
Yeah.
But this is something where I actually think this is actually a fairly realistic scenario in the Gospels, at least, because it seems like Jesus did kind of like break some of those like norms a little bit, where he did have women disciples following them around and everything, which would have totally been like against like Jewish customs at that time and everything. And so to me, this was actually a little bit more believable than like some of the interactions we had between Thomas and Rama.
Yes.
Just because like Thomas and Raymond, it's like there's like flirtation and stuff, which I don't think you'd really see that as much. But this I could totally see. Yeah. Like two disciples of Jesus coming across a woman in need, and even though like everybody else rejects her, they'd be like, no, come with us. I could actually see that potentially happening, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, and it aligns with Jesus' teachings and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And then we cut to a group of 4 people. It is Judah, Mary Magdalene, Tamar, and Zebedee. And they are walking through an olive grove, and they're looking at just all these different olive trees and everything. And the reason Judas is with them is because, once again, he's in charge of the purse. And so I kind of like how they've incorporated this, and we're getting to see how this would actually function.
Yeah.
And eventually they end up bartering a deal with this guy who seems kind of cocky, but he's like the son of the olive grove owner.
Yeah.
And something about it, like just like the whole interaction between all of them, it was bringing to mind something from the Bible that I couldn't totally place. I don't think they were necessarily going for anything overtly biblical.
Yeah.
There were just certain like the scenario seemed very familiar to me, but I think I was more thinking about like the vineyard owner and his son and stuff like that, not necessarily olive grove.
Okay.
But there's something about like the whole scenario, like you had a sick olive grove, like it just sounds like something just waiting to be turned into a parable. I guess that's what it is.
Yeah.
Because you have the olive grove owner who is too sick to take care of it, so he entrusts it to his son, but his son is too focused on doing all these other things that he doesn't want to take care of himself, even though he has the ability. And so something about that, I was like, like it's not necessarily a parable, but I could totally see this being turned into a parable. You know, it felt biblical. It was just kind of weird.
Yeah.
But there was one thing, I didn't write it down in my notes here. I always type up notes and I just send them to Brienne, so we're going off that.
Yeah.
But there was one thing that Tamar had said. I like that they just like kind of just throw stuff in there, but there was one thing, I'm trying to remember who asked the question. I think Judas had said like, so what made y'all like want to get an olive grove? And then Tamar was like, it was in the budget. Like we had room for it. And to me, I'm like, having just like worked in churches where it's like that's the mentality. I don't like that mentality a lot. It's like, because it's like the whole question of like, we were so busy asking whether or not we could that we never stopped to ask if we should. Yeah. And like that seems to be Tamar's mentality. Like it's interesting to me. I've noticed like a lot of people defending Tamar and a lot of her stuff she's been saying over the last few episodes, which is very intriguing to me because I don't think we're supposed to be. Like, I think we're supposed to understand where she's coming from, but I don't think we're supposed to say that she's doing the right thing. Because I think in many ways, Tamar is kind of supposed to be a picture of like consumeristic American religion. Like, it seems like that's kind of what they're doing with her, to where she is kind of very material focused. And like what we saw in the last episode is that she is not willing to sacrifice any of her own stuff, but she is more than willing to sell everybody else's. Like, she's like, hey, Zebedee, like, yeah, you should like go on this business venture and you should like do all this stuff and sacrifice everything you have in order to create this olive grove thing. And she's like, oh, we've had money dedicated to the ministry. We should go spend that money to buy the olive grove. And, oh, we should sell all of Matthew's stuff. But then they're like, well, can you give up something? She's like, oh, no, I can't give up this. This is like an important heirloom and my family lives through this. And they're like, well, that doesn't even line up with Christian belief. And she's like, well, yeah, it does. It's my story. And I'm sticking to it. And so there's a lot of stuff with Tamar. I'm like, I don't think we're supposed to agree with her. But I really like it because it's very realistic. Like I just think it's interesting because I think it's a very big commentary on our culture that so many people look at Tamar, and I've seen so many people defending her. I'm like, I don't think we're supposed to, because I think she really is a picture of us. Like, I think I am Tamar, right? To where it's like, I'm willing to be like, oh, let's give up, everybody else give up all your stuff, but I'm not giving up any of mine. Whereas like, no, like we should be giving up stuff. And in this, I thought that was a very interesting line where they're like, why should we do this? And she's like, it was in the budget. And I'm like, that is not a good mentality. Like, have more reason than just that.
Yeah.
You know, like all because it's in the budget doesn't mean you just spend it all. Like use it for good reasons.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas even Judas seems kind of skeptical, like, "Mm, okay.
Yeah. I don't know that's a smart decision.
yeah.
But okay.
But yeah, so what did you think about that whole, or what do you think about that developing plot line with the olive grove?
I think it's interesting. It definitely adds something, I think, for like the women's side of the ministry,
Mhm.
just because now a lot of it is based off Jesus and like the 12 disciples.
Yeah.
And them going out 2 by 2, and him discipling them and them doing miracles and learning from him and his teachings. And so I think it's a cool plot line that is not necessarily something that we find in the Bible, but it's something that could have possibly happened or something that could happen, that so that way the women can still be in it, and it's kind of cool. I like it.
Yeah, I think they have more freedom with what they
Yeah.
do there because we just know so little about the role of the women disciples with Jesus. Like we just hear that they're there and that they're supporting his ministry. And so I think that they have a lot more creative freedom on like what they do with those characters.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Whereas a lot of the other ones, like they have to employ, like they're putting in fictional elements of it, but they have to get a lot of these disciples to like specific places. Like, and they have to be at certain locations at certain times, you know, like if we know all the disciples are with Jesus at this moment, well, then they're kind of bound to keep them there. Whereas with the women disciples, there's just like creative freedom. It's like, let's just like, you know, like they have more freedom to explore stuff that directly reflects our own culture. Like, I think like that's where they have a lot of room to deal with. Let's take a modern situation, put it there and add our commentary. Like they did that with Mary Magdalene last season, right? Where Mary Magdalene kind of like backslid and she went back to her old way of life. Like they just have more freedom, I think, with the women characters, which I think is really cool. So like you could see like the male disciples are more likely going to be involved with stuff that directly supports like the biblical aspect of it. Whereas the women, like there's just more freedom. And I think that's cool. So I wouldn't be surprised if they even have more fun writing the women's stuff just because
it's so unknown.
Yeah, you have less constraints on where you can go with it, which I think is kind of cool.
And I'm excited to see how they can take those cultural concepts and they can weave it in with different biblical concepts and tie it into the stories that are straight from the Bible that the men are experiencing, and how they can tie those kind of two together, and that it's not necessarily stories straight from the Bible that the women are experiencing, but it's principles, which are kind of more applicational. So that'll be kind of cool too, just to see how those are interweaved together. Yeah,
in general, I just think it's cool. And like it also testifies to the fact that people don't change really. I mean, just cultures change and stuff, but really we are still the same. And that's something that I think is probably one of the most beneficial aspects of the show, is that they are taking even modern problems and putting them in old cultures, because we don't know if there was a woman exactly like Tamar back then, but if we go through that issue nowadays, you can guarantee that there were disciples who went through that exact same issue back then. And so I do like that they're being able to do that because we just don't see a lot of that. I mean, like the Gospels are particularly focused on telling us the story of Jesus, right? And so we don't know a lot about like what the disciples went through. I mean, even the 2 by 2 thing, right? When Jesus sends them out, we don't get like a detailed explanation. Like we want one, but it doesn't give it to us because it doesn't, like, whenever the gospel writers are writing their stories, it doesn't serve their purpose to say like, oh, let's just go like detail all this, because you don't need to know, because it's specifically telling us who Jesus was, what he did, and it's getting us from the cradle to the cross and to the ascension and stuff. And so we just don't know a lot about that stuff, even though we want to. We see more of that in the book of Acts, because that's specifically focused on telling the story of the church. And whenever we get to the epistles, we see more of that because it's like talking about how to live as a Christian. But we don't know much about that during the time of the Gospels. And so it is cool. Like that's one cool thing about The Chosen, is that it's telling it from the perspective of people who follow Jesus. And if we're people who follow Jesus, then we can see that stuff. So it's kind of cool. Then after that, we cut to Simon and Gaius. And they were working on the cistern, and I thought it was interesting that Gaius is actually getting his hands dirty here. Like
I thought it was too.
In the last episode, he said that he would just like he'd be overwatching the whole thing. But he's actually like getting in there and like he's actually putting in the work, which I just thought spoke volumes to who Gaius is. Because technically he should just be standing there overwatching it, and the fact that he would be willing to get his hands dirty with a Jew is just so cool to me. Like that says just volumes about Gaius's character and who he's become. I mean, like they even joke about it, like, don't you call us dogs and stuff, and like you call us dogs. Like that's how they viewed each other. Gentiles looked down on Jews, Jews looked down on Gentiles. but the fact that you have Simon and Gaius, like really it says more about Gaius, because Simon, I mean, his people need a cistern fixed and he's just putting in the work.
Yeah.
Whereas the fact that Gaius is getting in there and doing this, I just love that.
Mm-hmm.
Gaius is like, I need like a Team Jairus shirt on the back and Gaius on the, like, Jairus and Gaius. There you go. I just need a shirt that says like, it's where I can just like flip it around and it says both, because those are probably two of my favorite
have one
characters.
That's like half and half, like
ooh,
yeah, split down the middle.
Jairus.
Oh goodness.
Jairus.
Oh,
and so they're having a good time in this, and they're like digging and everything, and then they eventually get like really excited and they accidentally clap hands, and you could tell like kind of high five each other, and then you can tell immediately Simon's like, got too into it, because he touched hands with a Gentile, now he's like unclean.
Yeah.
And Gaius is like, oh no, were you not supposed to do that? And so they start teasing each other back and forth about the whole dog thing. And Gaius just once again voices how he's confused by Jewish culture, which I imagine is probably how a lot of people feel watching the show. They're like, oh, well, this is strange.
Yeah.
It takes adapting to.
Yeah.
And especially for somebody like Gaius, he would be confused by this. And eventually they kind of sit down for a little break, and Simon explains that his apology didn't work. And this is where Gaius is like, wait, you didn't know what you were sorry for? He's like, well, you didn't tell me that. Like, I assumed you knew. Like, well, of course it's not going to work if you don't know. And then he's like, I don't know why you take relationship advice from me. That was a terrible idea. And he's like, I took it because you offered. I didn't ask for relationship advice. You just gave it to me.
Yeah. Thought it was trustworthy.
Like, I just feel so bad for Simon and all this. Like, poor guy. I mean, he's like,
he's trying from all directions.
Yeah. He's like, I took advice from a Roman and it backfired. Like, you think that I just did that willingly?
Where do I go now?
Yeah. And one thing that's cool here is that Gaius learns that Simon doesn't have any kids or anything like that, but Simon returns and he asks Gaius, do you have any children? And this is really cool. If you know the Bible and you know the Gospels, you'll see what they did here. He says that he has 2 kids, but then he specifies. He has one of his own children, and then he has one child who was technically a servant boy, but who he adopted and is raised as his own. This is cool because we know just from the trailers and stuff that Gaius is going to be the one who asked Jesus to heal his son or his servant. The reason I say son or servant is because depending on which gospel account you read, there's conflicting details. Some people call this a contradiction. I'd say that maybe it's just telling 2 different stories, but the stories are so similar that it's kind of hard to make that argument. And so what the creators of the show are doing is that they're blending the stories together.
Yeah.
Because in one story, you have a centurion coming up to Jesus, asking Jesus to heal his son. In another story, you have a centurion coming up to Jesus, asking him to heal his servant. So what they're doing in the show is they're saying, servant, son, boom.
Put them together.
It's a servant who he adopted as his son and raised as his own. Mwah! Chef's kiss.
Yeah. Very smart.
Love how they did that. Because we'd speculated about that. Because I even talked about that, I think, in my prediction video when I went through the trailer. I was like, hey, I don't know which one they're going to choose, but it's one or the other. And they picked both. They said, ¿Por qué no los dos? Let's do both. Why not both? And so they're blending them together to where obviously this is the son that's going to be sick. And I think he's already sick. Because I think we have evidence of this already in their interaction here. Because what Simon does is he starts teasing Gaius about it. And he just starts teasing him. And Gaius throws dirt on him. And at first it seems like Gaius is just messing with him. But whenever Simon asks about it, he's like, whoa, dude, I was just joking. Gaius is like, don't joke about that. Like I don't take this lightly. And then Gaius just like goes back to work and starts going like double time. And you can see that something really shook Gaius up. And so to me, this is just me fan theorizing here. I think that Gaius's son/servant has been sick over this time period.
That's what I was thinking.
And I think that whenever he heard about like the Sermon on the Mount stuff, he was really thinking, because he was trying to think like, how does this like affect things? Like, would I be able to approach Jesus about this? Once again, I don't know, but I'm thinking that's what's going on here. And I think the issue that the son/servant thing is so sensitive to him is because that person's suffering. Right. And I think that they're sick, and he's like, I don't take this lightly. Like, don't joke around about this, because he's in a very sensitive place with it right now. And he doesn't know what he's going to do, but he's kind of bottling it all up. And I think, I just think that's what's going on. And then I think that they're going to use the events that happen later in this episode as a catalyst, because he sees that Jesus went to heal somebody who everybody said was dying. Right. And so I think it's really brilliant how they're kind of tying it all together. But I think that's what they're doing. What do you think?
Well, there was also a moment whenever Gaius was talking after he had thrown the dirt on him, and it was the last thing that he said before like the scene had ended, but it was like he cut his sentence off. It was like he said something like, well, that's not what I want, or it was something like that, to where Simon should have responded with like, well, what is it that you want? But he didn't. He was just like silent. Like there was something that Gaius said that he didn't fully finish his sentence, and you saw Simon kind of like look at him and ponder, but then that's whenever all the people started rushing through, and so he didn't have a chance to ask him. And so that would set it up really perfectly. I don't remember exactly what Gaius said.
That might come later on.
It cut it.
It might come later on because
it was while they were at the cistern.
Well, but there's another scene later on with the cistern. Yeah. So it might come later on.
Maybe.
I'm not sure. Because I
thought it was that scene.
Because they have another conversation later on where they start talking about their gods and everything.
No, I don't think it was then.
Oh, because that's whenever the crowds come up and interrupt them.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, well maybe it was whenever they were talking about his son though.
Oh, okay.
So it was during that one. Then it just wasn't the people rushing in. There was something else that had made him stop or something.
Okay. I'm not
because
sure.
Simon just looked at him and like you could tell he was probably thinking of something, but he didn't actually ask anything.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember there being something else in there that kind of did catch my attention.
Yeah.
But obviously, we only watched this one time, and I was taking notes quick. But
and Gaius wasn't like looking at Simon; he was like shoveling, and it was like almost like an under the breath comment that he made.
Yeah,
but it was like a cutoff sentence to where like he was about to finish it, and he was like, "No, I'm not going to." And it set up a thing for Simon to ask a question.
Yeah,
but he didn't.
Yeah, because I think what Gaius is doing is right now he's struggling because I think he's beginning to believe in Jesus. Mm-hmm. And he might even totally believe in Jesus, but he just is trying to figure out how somebody under authority, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody under Roman authority can go approach a Jewish rabbi and ask for help. Mm-hmm. But I think he's becoming convinced that maybe this rabbi is the only one who can help him. Mm-hmm. And so I think that this is the first time we've had that groundwork laid, and we only have 3 episodes left in the season. And so there's going to have some payoff coming up pretty soon, I think. Mm-hmm. Just because, I mean, the last episode's really building towards feeding the 5,000. So I don't know. I'm excited for it because
I love Gaius.
And it's cool because Gaius and Jairus are my 2 favorite characters, and they're both kind of in the same situation. Yeah. So
I think parallels are cool.
I think it's really cool. So then we move on. And once again, I'm going to revisit a lot of y'all's comments at the end of this. I just want to kind of get through this episode, and then we can revisit it so that we can figure out how much time we have left. But so we move on, and now we have Jairus asking Yusuf to take him to Jesus, right? Basically, Yusuf walks into the synagogue, and Jairus is like frantic, and he's just like, I don't know what to do. And like, he's like, don't bother me. Like, don't mess with me. Like, don't make light of my situation. My daughter is dying. And he's like, wait a second. Can you take me to Jesus? Like, you know who I want you to take me to. And Yusuf, I like what they do with Yusuf in this episode too, because you see that he's still, once again, not bold enough to step out in faith.
He's torn.
Yeah, he's torn, and he's still a little bashed. Like, he's willing to help out Jairus right now, but he's still wanting to be secretive about it. So Yusuf explains that even Jesus' men don't often know where he is. He's like, I don't know where Jesus is at. Yeah. And they're like, well, take me to one of his disciples. He's like, they don't even usually know where he's at. Yeah. Which I just thought was kind of a fun little commentary on like being a disciple of Jesus, because you're a disciple of Jesus doesn't mean that you know where he's at all the time, because you're supposed to follow him, but half the time you're like, where's Jesus at?
Where's Walter?
It's like, yeah. Who said he was a tame lion? That's a reference to Narnia. So Yusuf ends up taking him to Andrew's house, and I believe this is the first time we've seen Andrew's house.
I think so.
Right? It's a big house. There's like a bunch of bunks in the back and everything, which biblically speaking, it does seem like Simon and Andrew lived together, because in the Bible it does say that like they went to Simon and Andrew's house, but for the course of the show, they make them living in different places. And Judas is there, which I just thought was an interesting choice. Like the first scene you have at Andrew's house, Andrew's not there, but they take him to Andrew's house, and Judas is the one there, and he opens the door, and Jairus explains that his daughter is dying, and Judas is like, I'm sorry, I don't know how to help you. Okay, bye-bye. And he goes to close the door, but then he says, hey, well, if you want to know, go ask Simon, like his brother. And so that's their next destination. They're going to go to Simon's. I thought it was interesting that Yusuf took him to Andrew's house, but I guess that's because Yusuf and Andrew have that prior relationship from back in season 2. They came across one another, and this was back whenever Andrew was still really freaking out about John the Baptist and everything. And remember, like, him and Philip left and everything, and they came across Tamar and I think, but I think they interacted with Yusuf there. And so that would explain why Yusuf has that special, like, why he would know where Andrew lives and stuff. And so they go away, and this was interesting. We have Simon Z barging in on the women and explaining that Jesus is back. This confused me for multiple reasons. first off, you have Simon Z barging into a household where women are staying.
Yeah.
That I probably would not do. In any situation, especially back in like first century Israel, I wouldn't recommend anybody doing that nowadays either.
Yeah.
Even though women and men are like a lot more free flowing, I was like, that's kind of odd. Like I probably would not like, knock on the door or something. Probably don't just like, hey guys.
Yeah.
I think they were trying to show his excitement, but probably just don't barge in on a room with women.
Yeah.
Z, like just note to self. But the one thing that confused me is I think just the timeline of these 2 episodes is confusing me because I think this is supposed to take place the day after the previous episode. But they were with, like, the women and Simon Z were with Jesus the night before, right? Because remember, they all came to Simon's house, and Simon Z and the women were with him, and they all came in, and that's when the crowds were gathering around.
Yeah.
And so I guess we're supposed to think that, like to me, whenever he came in, to me it was suggesting that Jesus had just arrived back from, like, his journey. But I guess they're just saying that maybe Jesus like just went and stayed somewhere. Yeah, like I don't know. It was kind of confusing me because I was like, well, they know Jesus is back. Like, so I guess like maybe he was just back from staying somewhere. But I figured that wouldn't Jesus have stayed at one of their houses in Capernaum? I don't know. Like that's where I was just kind of confused because I was like, where is Jesus back from? Because like Mary and Simon, like they knew that he was there because they were with him literally the day before. It just makes me wonder if like they shuffled some of this stuff. Yeah. Like to me, it just seems like this episode and last episode, like maybe the conflict between Simon and Eden was supposed to be later, but then at the same time, you couldn't have that happen. Like it couldn't be that because you have Simon and Gaius having the conversation. I don't know, like just something about it. I was just kind of confused about some of the dialogue. Like, where is he back from? And like, why are y'all confused about it? And why are you so excited? Like, you literally just saw him yesterday. Yeah. Unless we're supposed to think that they get this excited every time Jesus like shows up from somewhere. Maybe. I don't know. Like, because I think this is just set the day afterwards. And so I don't know, like, where did he have time to go? Like, I mean, it's just daytime and y'all were with him last night. Like, he probably just went and slept and like woke up and came back, right? Yeah. So I don't know. Like, that was just kind of confusing because he was so excited and he like barges in. He's back. I'm like, okay, cool. I don't know. That was just kind of confusing me because it's literally the same group that we saw with him last night, because it was literally Simon Z and the women. And so I don't know. That was just to me that made more sense. Like if that scene in and of itself was supposed to be from the last episode, right? Because it would make sense if for some reason that went there, and then that would explain why they are with Jesus going to Simon's house. You know what I mean? Yeah. It seemed kind of weird for me. I think they were just like trying to show. I think they put it in this episode to explain the excitement, to anticipate the crowd's excitement. Yeah. It just felt out of place to me because it seems like that clip was supposed to go there, especially because the last episode we actually saw Tamar and Mary Magdalene at Matthew's house. Yep. You know, like it almost seems like as I'm explaining this, I'm thinking that's almost exactly what happened. It just felt weird to me that it was in this episode. Yeah. Sorry, I went way too long on that. I'm just being the chronology nerd again. Sorry, I'm just trying to understand. I'm sorry. Okay. And then we catch Jesus, and now he is are they at Simon's house? Is that where they're at right now? Yes, because Eden's there and everything. Yeah. And he is breaking his fast. And they're like, well, how long have you been fasting? He's like, oh, I ate last night, so 8 hours. Which tells me, once again, this is early morning. So to go back to my chronology thing, they were with him at nighttime, and he is literally breaking his fast because it is breakfast, right? So it's morning time, right? That's all I'm trying to communicate here. Yeah. The chronology is confusing me. Okay, I think I went too much on this. I'm sorry. Okay, so he breaks his fast, and I did like this because he mentions something to Eden, and she responds, and there's just this moment where Jesus just looks at her, and you can tell that he knows something's wrong, but it also is interesting because it almost seems like it caught him off guard that something's wrong. Yeah. Which is also, once again, weird because the previous night he knew something was wrong because Simon and Eden were kind of lashing it out. But I think I liked this scene because it lingered on it, where he looked at her, was just to me called back to season 1, wherever he said, I see you. Right. So everybody else is just going about their own thing, not noticing what Eden's going through, but he looks at her and you can tell he's troubled by it. And it makes me wonder, who's going to have a conversation with Eden first, Simon or Jesus? Yeah. You know, I'm hoping it's Simon personally, because I would rather, I'd kind of like to see them learn to communicate without Jesus having to be the intermediary there. Yeah. But I would also, it'd be fine if Jesus did that as well, because maybe it'd like call her back to her senses or something. But I think it'd probably be more beneficial for Simon's part if they could mend that together.
Yeah.
But
well, I think that'd be a good thing to have in a show, like showing like healthy communication and conflict in marriage and stuff like that. Like, I think that's a good thing to showcase also. So.
Yeah. And then Philip, he ends up asking Jesus about fasting. And this is actually something that's pulled from Matthew chapter 9. In the context of Matthew chapter 9, I believe we actually have it's in a slightly different context, because I believe people actually come up to Jesus and they're asking him the question about like, hey, why do your disciples not fast?
Yes.
And Jesus responds and explains the same thing that we see here. But in this context, Philip is anticipating it. And he says, well, Jesus, people are probably going to come up to us and they're going to ask, why don't we fast? What do we say? And so it's a slightly different context, but it's anticipating the context from the Bible.
Yeah.
Matthew chapter 9, where Jesus kind of explains the whole bridegroom analogy. And then he goes with the wineskin analogy as well. And I thought they explained that in a really good way. Just because once again, they're taking cultural context stuff and just explaining it to a modern audience. Yeah. And this is where we actually get them, the disciples being kind of confused, because they're beginning to hear something that they haven't really heard about thus far. And they're like, taken away? What do you mean? Because in both of these analogies, Jesus is explaining that he's going to be leaving. And to me, this was the thing. It was interesting to me that they had Jesus announce this whenever not all the disciples are there.
That's
like there's just a few disciples there, but he's like, that's a pretty big deal.
Judas is like across the street.
Yeah, Judas is like over there. He's like, I didn't know he was leaving. What? But yeah, so we have Matthew saying like, taken away, and Jesus says, hold on to that thought.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to explain that more later.
Yeah.
And then he explains the whole wineskin analogy, and then after all that, like the disciples explain they don't understand. Jesus says the ways of this kingdom won't fit like normal frameworks, and this is where Philip says, being a rebel is kind of nice, or being a revolutionary. Being a revolutionary is kind of nice. And then little James says, I still want to know what you mean by gone, because I will totally admit, from the disciples' perspective, this is something that's always intrigued me about reading the Gospels. That had to be terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think about it from their perspective. I mean, we don't fully get this nowadays, 2,000 years removed, but you left everything to follow Jesus.
Committed your life.
Like you left everything. You left your job. You left your family. You are following Jesus full time as a student.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he's like, by the way, I'm going to be going.
Yeah.
What do you mean you're going to be going? Like,
you're
where?
Just gonna, like, peace out.
Yeah, where are you going? You're like abandoning us? What? You're going to like go on vacation to England, to China? What are you doing? Like, they don't know what he's talking about. Yeah. And I love that, because that's actually a theme throughout the Gospels. They're so confused. They're like, where? And like, especially at the Last Supper discourse, they're so confused. They're like, where are you going? And Thomas is like, what is the way? Like, because Jesus is like, oh, you know the way to go where I'm going, but you can't go there yet. Like, Jesus is so cryptic about all of it, and I love it. They're like, no, we don't know the way. Like,
we've been trying to figure it out this entire time, and we've got no closer to the answer.
They're like, Jesus, would you like to give us a GPS? Because like, we want to know the way. He's like, no, you know the way. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father. And they're like, but how are we going to get there? Like, if you're gone and you're the way, like, like they're just so confused. And it literally goes into the Gospel of into the Book of Acts as well. Called the Gospel of Acts. No, it goes in the Book of Acts to where like they're like, so Jesus, like, now that you like died and resurrected, it seems like they're assuming that was the going away.
Yeah, he's
right?
Back.
He went away to came back. They're like, so now are you gonna like establish your kingdom? And he's like, no, now I'm going away. And they're like, what?
That wasn't it?
And I love it, because then he leaves, and then the angels show up, and they're like, what are y'all guys doing standing here? Like, literally the disciples are just standing there, like looking up at the clouds, and they're like, what just happened? Like, did he just leave?
Yeah.
And the angels are like, what are y'all doing standing here? Get to work. And the disciples are like, oh, I guess,
that's it.
Okay. And then literally that's the rest of the New Testament. Like, we were talking about this in 1 Thessalonians, like the whole thing, like the Apostle Paul's like, he's coming back at some point, but they have no idea. Like, they don't know, is he going to be gone like a week, 2 weeks? Turns out it was 2,000 years plus.
Yeah.
So I just love that, because that's like a running gag throughout the Gospels. And I love that they're introducing that here, to where they're just like, what do you mean by like leave? Like, what? Like, we left everything for this. And so to me, I just think that's it's very funny. And whenever you think about it that way, you'll notice it throughout the Gospels. It's very entertaining. Okay. Moving on, I've explained scenes enough. Let's go over to you. Would you like to explain the next scene with Jairus and Yusuf barging in on Jesus?
When was this?
Right here.
Oh.
It's a scene like whenever they actually arrive to Simon's house and Jairus is inviting Jesus.
Yeah. So they come in, and there's this really powerful moment between Jairus and Jesus where no words are really exchanged at first. I mean, they just make like eye contact, and you see just how powerful that moment is. And he doesn't even say anything. He just falls to his knees. and just kind of like sits there, looks up, makes eye contact with Jesus, and you can see like the tears whelping in his eyes. And Jesus comes to him and tells him to stand up, and you see like all the disciples behind them. I thought it was kind of cool. Like whenever they'd pan over the shot, all of them are like standing up behind them. Like, what's going on?
To be a disciple.
Yeah, this person just barged into the house. He fell to their knees. Jesus is saying to stand up, and like there's just so much going on. The poor disciples in the back, they're like, oh my gosh, what's going on?
Which once again is true to how the gospels are too. Like the disciple, like it'll always just like something will be happening that it says the disciples were greatly amazed. You're like, oh yeah, understatement of the year.
Yeah.
But yeah, what I really like here is Jairus comes in and he falls to his knees, but it's almost like he's not just falling. It's almost like something pushes him down to his knees. Like it's with a force. And he just says, I know you. Mm-hmm. And Jesus, he just says, do you? And Jairus is like, I know you. Like he doesn't have any other words. He just says, I know you. Yeah. And the implication is like, once again, that Jesus is God. Like that is the only way you can explain this, because it's like, if Jesus is just a teacher, well, he's never met Jesus before.
How would you know?
No, like, and if he's just the Messiah, I mean, that's still a big deal, but no, he's like, I know you.
Yeah.
Like I've studied you and I've known you since I was young. Like, like he's basically just like, you're God. Like, and that's why it's like, he's knocked to his knees, because how else can he respond? And I just love that. Once again, Team Jairus all the way.
Yeah.
I think I'm legit going to go make a shirt. I'm going to make a shirt and I'm going to like order it and I'm going to wear it. Oh, I'm going to do it. Oh, this is bad. I'll get a Team Jairus and a Team Gaius one and we could both wear them. It'll be awesome.
We'll switch out.
Yeah, but so he falls in, I know you. And then he even says, I have read accounts from, and he looks at Yusuf, someone I trust. And I love Jesus even gives Yusuf a little look there.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of funny. And Jesus also looking around, like it's really an entertaining scene.
Yeah.
But I love that he kind of protects Yusuf's identity there as well. Because he's not, because the whole idea is that Yusuf cannot be a public disciple. Like it's okay for Jairus to know, but it would seem like even Jesus' disciples can't fully know where Yusuf lands.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, we've been watching a lot of Smallville lately. So it's almost like Yusuf has like a secret identity, you know, like he's a secret disciple of Jesus, which is what the Bible says about Joseph of Arimathea once again. But I think that's kind of cool. And he says, you're a healer, right? And Jesus specifies, yeah, I'm a healer of more than just physical maladies, right? So he's like, yeah, I'm a healer, all right, but I can do a lot more than heal just physical stuff. And it's like, that's just like, it's pretty cool. He's like, my resume is much broader than you might have expected. Like, throw at me whatever you got and I can heal. Once again, you have the theme of Jesus being a healer. And he asks for Jesus to heal his daughter. And Jesus says, you have this much faith. And once again, Jairus says, I know you.
Yeah.
Right. That's his response. Like he doesn't.
That's the only response.
Yeah. Like he's just, I know you. Right. He's studied scriptures. He's studied Yusuf's account. And for him, that's enough. I know you.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because Yusuf's account was literally just recording the Sermon on the Mount. Right. And so he says he studied the Sermon on the Mount. And through knowing that, like studying that and studying scripture, he knows Jesus, which is cool because the Sermon on the Mount doesn't include any actions of Jesus. It is simply Jesus showing his values. So he has studied the Sermon on the Mount and he says he has seen the character of God. Like that's cool. Because to be fair, the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus sharing his values in a way to where you get to know Jesus' character. Right? Like what is Jesus' value? What is he? And he says, I've studied this. I've compared it to the scriptures. I know you. Which is cool because if you think about it, I mean, David probably had very similar values because David was a man after God's own heart. But Jairus has gone beyond that. He's like, no. Like this is God. It just kind of, it's very impressive. And then Jesus says, take me to her. And so that's where we're going to head. But then we cut back to the second scene with Simon and Gaius. They're once again working on the cistern. And Simon begins asking about the religion. And they kind of have this back and forth where he says like, oh, we just have a lot of parties. And Simon's like, we have parties too. And Gaius, it's actually interesting. I've had this exact conversation with people before.
Oh, really?
Because, well, yeah, like literally the exact conversation where it's like, oh yeah, we have parties too. And then the person who's not a Christian says, yeah, but our parties are a lot more fun. And then I'm like, we have fun at our parties too. It just depends on how you define the word.
Yeah.
And literally, so whoever wrote this scene I can guarantee you they're speaking from experience
Because
I haven't just had this conversation once. I've had it with multiple people to where like just talking with somebody who's not a Christian and they're like, oh, you Christians don't have fun. I'm like, well, depends on how you define the word fun. Like, I think you can look at me and see that I'm a joyful, happy person. It's not like I'm missing out on any fun in my life. I just find fun in different things, you know? And so I just thought that was kind of great, like kind of fun because I was like, bingo. Yep. Because it's literally just the power to win an argument is the power to define your terms. And so then they start talking more about religion. First off, he quotes Jeremiah 2. Simon does. And he says, he starts thinking about how this might be judgment from God because he says, like, you have rejected your people and therefore you are like a cistern without water. And Gaius is like, oh, this sounds like a riddle. And Simon's like, yeah, my life feels like a riddle right now. But then Gaius begins to interpret it. And I just thought that was cool.
I thought it was.
Like, I thought it was cool how Gaius, like, you would have thought, like, he would have just dismissed it and not even thought about the thing. But he, like, processed the words. Like, he was listening to what Simon said enough to be all like, well, it sounds like, do you think that y'all are sinning against God? Like, he's, like, actually studying the scriptures and just, like, what little he knows. And he's interpreting it correctly. And I just thought that was cool.
I thought it was cool, too.
And so, so have you forsaken your God of water? And Simon's like, well, our God isn't just a God of water. He's a God of everything. And this is something, I don't know if it made you think of this, but it made me think of the book of Jonah, mainly because in the book of Jonah, you have this whole thing where Jonah is literally on the run from God, and he's with a bunch of pagan sailors, and they're trying to figure out, like, which God has, like, cursed them, that there's, like, this huge storm going on. And Jonah's like, it's my fault. I abandoned God. And they're like, well, you know, who's your God? And he's like, I serve Yahweh, the God of the land and the seas. And, like, from the perspective of the pagan sailors, they're like, so you abandoned, like you're running away from the God of the seas, and you chose to get on our boat? Like, come on, Jonah. Like, why would you run away from the water God on our boat? But from Jonah's perspective, it's like, well, he's the God of everything. So really, you shouldn't be running away from it anywhere. But to me, that's kind of what it made me think of, because Gaius is like, yeah, it's the God of water. And so I was like, no, we got one God. He's the God of everything. And Gaius is like, well, that sounds actually more complicated. Like, how do you know, like, who to sacrifice to? Simon's like, yeah, that's actually a lot more complicated, because you're having to make sacrifices to everybody. And Gaius is like, it's not that complicated, and then proceeds to list out like, all the complicated aspects of it. But I thought it was really funny. I really like mythology and everything, and it's interesting to me to think that people actually believe that stuff. And there are some people who still kind of believe in some of it, but I like mythology. So Gaius lists all that stuff, but then they see everybody rushing to follow Jesus, and who is it? I think James and John run by, and first off, it's Barnaby. Barnaby's like limping by, and he's like, Barnaby, what are you doing? He's like, Jesus is about to heal people. Everybody's saying he's gonna heal people, and he's like, shouldn't you be there? And Simon's like, I probably should. That's probably it's probably true. And so Simon gets up and he starts running, and James and John are with him and everything. And they rush to follow Jesus. And really the crowd is just like overwhelming, which we're really getting into the biblical content here. And the saddest part to me is that little James falls.
I know.
I didn't like that.
Sad.
Poor little James. I mean, like, I thought it was gonna like be something bigger. Like the way they showed him fall, I thought he was gonna get like trampled. I was like, oh no, but Matthew just helps him up, and I thought that was good. And so and then Z turns around and he just sees the zealot standing there watching him. I know it was supposed to be like a terrifying moment, but something about it just was funny to me. Like, I think it's just like the guy's facial expression. He's just like,
but he's like popping his head out.
Well, and he also wasn't super hidden, you know, like obviously it was because like there's this huge crowd and like they want you, like from a filmmaking perspective, you want to be able to see him immediately. But to me, it just didn't seem that intimidating because he's just like something about his face just didn't seem like super intimidating. Something about me is just like, Simon Z could take him easy. But I don't.
That scene made like the one at the beginning whenever. What are the other two? Thaddeus and
Nathaniel.
Whenever they were talking, I thought that was supposed to be a tie-in to that.
Oh, interesting.
But I mean, he's another zealot though. But I mean, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I noticed somebody in the live chat, they were saying that it could have been whenever he was talking with Atticus, but Atticus isn't even in this area anymore. Atticus went down to Jerusalem to talk with Pilate, so it wouldn't be that. I don't know, but I think that they were referencing like Simon talking to the Roman, but I don't know. Because that guy's not, because the zealots.
I was talking about whenever they said, would Simon kill.
Oh.
Like, would Simon go back to his
Oh.
old ways?
Oh.
And so I thought that was supposed to be
Gotcha.
to tie into that because that was another zealot.
Yeah.
And so he made eye contact. No one else saw it, but that was just supposed to be like a back of the mind, like, correlation between the two scenes.
Yeah.
Just that one
Yeah,
specific
that
comment,
makes
not that
sense.
whole scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just about him going back to his old ways. Or would he kill someone or would he fight someone?
Just goes and takes him on. Yeah. Well, hopefully not. I hope Simon Z doesn't kill anybody. That'd be a
would
wild
not good.
storyline.
Yeah.
But then we have Veronica. She's over there. She's calling for Jesus, and Nathaniel and Thad say, "We're gonna go get him. It'll be fine." She's saying, one thread, just one friend, just the fringe." For some reason, this scene called back to me. Like, you haven't seen this movie, but what's it called? Hacksaw Ridge.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, is that the right movie? Hold up, I gotta look this up because I don't want to. Yeah, I think that's the one. Yeah, Hacksaw Ridge. It's a movie about like this guy who he was in the military, but he didn't want to like fight, like a objector, but he would save people. And he would always say, just one more person. And he like saved like a bunch of people. I don't think this was a call back to that, but for some reason, whenever I was watching it, it made me think of it.
Cool.
Because she's just like one thread, one fringe. Like if I could just touch the fringe.
Yeah.
And basically we just see like her mentality and all this. And then actually, I thought it was cool. Like you see Gaius, and we're seeing him less in his like military stuff. You know, he's just like walking around,
like comfy cloak.
Yeah, and he's just walking around, and you see him like calming everybody down, like calming the Romans specifically.
Yeah, like don't go and mess with them.
Which I think is great because we get to see he's stepping out more boldly because really a Roman should not be allowing this to happen. Like this is what Romans fear. Like the Jews getting this crazy about one rabbi, they'd be terrified of this. Mm-hmm. And guys are like, just calm down, it's fine.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that he's like, just let Jesus do what he's going to do. Whereas like even in season 1, he would have never allowed this to happen.
Right.
And so I just think that's kind of cool. And then we have the pilgrim dude from the last episode. He actually bumps into Veronica and he's like calls her out. He's like, "Oh, you're the unclean girl." And he calls Yusuf over. And Yusuf, I do like that. I just like the ambiguity of him because he comes over and he's genuine. He's like, "Hey, we can figure out something to help you out. But just like don't cause a scene and don't like touch people."
Yeah.
But this girl's like, "Nah, I don't care what you have to say. I'm gonna get to Jesus."
Yeah.
And so she pushes past them, and she falls down. And as she falls, she touches his seat, right? The little fringe, tassels. Like the tassels. And then you have that really cool like dolly shot. I forget what it's called. But like the zoom where Jesus like kind of, he almost has like anxiety or something.
Yeah.
Where he's kind of like panicky. What did you think about like how they just portrayed Jesus reacting in that scene?
It was definitely, it not caught me off guard, but kind of just because we haven't seen Jesus react to anything in that way before. And so I was, I guess, like kind of confused as to what was going on until he started speaking and he was explaining like, who touched me? I felt a power go out of me. Because we haven't really seen him react like that before. Yeah. And so it kind of caught me off guard.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting creative choice because I guess I've just never pictured him as reacting like that.
That dramatically.
Well, yeah, because like he definitely reacts. I mean, it's biblical, right? That like somebody touched him and he's like, "Whoa, who did that?"
Yeah.
But to me, it seemed like it'd be more shock. Whereas like the way that they portray it, it's like he's like almost
stop
having
in time.
Well, no, yeah, it's like anxiety, like to where like everything gets like fuzzy all around him. He's like it's almost like he got dizzy or something.
Yeah.
Like it's like that took a lot of power out of him, which is just to me that's always just been an interesting scene in general because it's like, how does that work? You know, like you have like he genuinely felt the power like come out of him. Like to me, I guess I've always pictured him more looking exhausted. Like it was almost like he was like walking the like whoa. Mm-hmm. Whereas I don't know, it was just a very interesting creative choice there. I don't have anything against it. It was just like it's just like whoa. Yeah. It's like he just like almost gets like delirious for a second.
I think they might have been going for more of like an emotional impact. And so that was kind of like a build up. And so it made the scene that followed it whenever they have dialogue between Veronica and Jesus that made that, I think they were trying to make that more impactful. Yeah. So
well, and I also think that they had to have him react a little bit that way because they had to find a natural way for his disciples to react. Because the disciples do react in the story and they're like, well, Jesus, like everybody's been crowding around you. Like, come on. Yeah. And so I think that like you have to like have him react in such a way to where like his disciples aren't just like calling him stupid. Right. But like, so he reacts, he's like, whoa. Like, and so like whenever Simon comes up, he's like, Master, like everybody's around you. Like, cause they're almost like trying to calm him down. Like, yeah, that like they recognize that he's almost overwhelmed or something.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was just an interesting shot, and I really like the creative like zoom of it. I just thought it was cool, which we'd seen a few times in the trailer. But Jesus feels the power go out of him. He's looking around. Who touched me? And for a second, I was kind of like, well, I mean, like she's right there. Like literally, everybody's like gathered around, and like she's kneeling down in the middle. But then they have him repeat it like once he's already looking down at her, and I was like, okay, so he's doing this on purpose.
Yes.
Because at first I was like, well, come on, Jesus, like literally everybody backed off. Like there's one person there.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah, but then he looks down. He says, if the person who touched me would say anything, I'm like, okay, I see what they're doing. Like he's saying it, asking her to come forward, which is good. Like I like that because once again, they're giving their interpretation of how it happens in scripture. Because in scripture, he does say, who touched me?
Yeah.
But they're saying, well, he wasn't ignorant to who touched him.
Mm-hmm.
He was just asking her to come forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's cool. Like, I like little stuff like that where you just get to see what they're going for there.
Yeah, me too.
And so she ends up explaining herself, and she explains like how she didn't want to make herself known because if she touched anybody, like she would make them unclean. Which, to be fair, is exactly like what she was doing is kind of a messed up thing to do, because she was really just passing through all these people, kind of not caring about the fact that by doing so, she was making them unclean. Yeah. So she was, in a way, acting kind of selfish, but in touching Jesus, she knew that he would make her clean.
Yeah.
Right. And so she was working by faith, but that is one thing about her. Like she is pushing past all these people and being like, yeah, I didn't want to make myself known because I knew people wouldn't really jive with that, which to be fair, yeah, that's true. And then she explains that the man from the pool is the one who told her about it. And that's whenever they look over at Simon Z, and Z's like, oh, wow. Like, I thought it's kind of cool. They tied that back in to where it's like the testimony is spreading. Yeah. And then he kneels down, as he does a lot of times, and he says, look up, right? Because she's not willing to look up. Like he says, daughter. And she says, I'm nobody's daughter, because her family's disowned her. And he says, look up. And he says, you are somebody's daughter. Let me see. Then he says, you are somebody's daughter, because he's adopting her in, kind of. Yeah. And that is the one place in the Gospels where Jesus calls anybody daughter, which is kind of cool. Even though in like literally the next scene, he's going to be around a little girl who is somebody else's daughter, but he just calls her little girl. Yeah. And he tells her that it wasn't my clothing that healed you, it was your faith. And I like that they specified that, right? Because some people might be tempted to think, oh, it was the clothing. No, it wasn't. It wasn't the clothing. It was the faith that healed her. And then he proclaims that she is clean. And he says like, hey, like you must be exhausted. And they both say the word at the same time. You must be exhausted. Yeah. And then he says, I wish I could stay longer, but I do have business to attend to. And I imagine Jairus is like, yeah, we do. My daughter's dying. And so this is where Jesus gets up. And I like that they have him do this. They're like, hey guys, like, I appreciate y'all being here, but like, I got stuff to do. And like, could y'all just like I'll talk to y'all later, but like, please disperse. And you can see them, you hear some of them groaning. They're like, oh, like they just leave. Yeah. And I like what they did here. They had Simon Z send like he sent Simon Z to escort the pilgrims back to Tent City, and he says, hey, and be nice to them, because he's aware that Z might not be inclined to do that, because we already saw that, right? Yeah. Like back in episode 2, I guess it was, where Z was kind of like being abrasive towards them. Yes. And Jesus wasn't there, but we see that Jesus knew, right? Yeah. Jesus knows his tendency around them. Yeah. And then he tells the other guys to just go and I guess like kind of accompany the crowds and help them disperse. But then he specifically says, Simon, James, and John, come with me. And I thought this was a very clever way of doing this, because I was wondering, like throughout the Gospels, throughout the episode, I was wondering how are they going to get it to where it's just Simon, James, and John? Because in the story, it's just Simon, James, and John who go with him to see the resurrection of this girl. And it seems like, biblically speaking, they were just kind of his inner circle, right? But they really haven't established that in the show so far. And so I was wondering how they were going to do that. And they did it in a very natural way, where it's almost like he's giving everybody a task, and then he's like, and y'all guys, I guess y'all can tag along. Yeah. But at the same time, it is laying the groundwork for that, so that if it happens again in the future, we already have it established, right? Like, they're the inner circle. Whereas here was a very natural way of like, you go do this, you go do this. Everybody has a task. It's not like he's just like, all right, 9 of y'all, stay out here. And then these 3 are going with me in there. Even though realistically, that's probably what he did. But for the context of the show, it's not like overtly making like the 9 feel bad. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then Veronica asked for a knife, and I think it's Philip that offers her one. And at first you're like, what does she need a knife for?
That's
like,
what I thought too. Here? I was like,
yeah, because they don't explain it.
Especially whenever they handed it to her and like she didn't do anything with it. She just held it.
Yeah.
And I was like, what did she need the knife for?
Once again.
I was like, what is she using it for? I thought she was gonna immediately use it, but she didn't. I was like, I don't know what the knife's for.
Yeah. But we'll come back to that in a little bit. And then we continue down the path, and then as Simon like Jairus is just excited because he's just got total confidence in Jesus here. But then we have another, I guess, Pharisee. I'm assuming it's a Pharisee. He like comes up, and you can tell that he's like, "Oh, I know who you are, Jesus." But then in the distance, you hear flutes, and we know what that means. We're like, "Oh no!" And Jairus is all of a sudden like really shaken up. It's like, no, and you know, the Pharisee dude, he's really not even that like sympathetic about it.
No.
He's more almost just like offended by Jesus being there.
Yeah.
But then Jesus says, "Do not be afraid, only believe. She will be well." And what I love about Jairus here is that it does calm him.
Yeah.
I mean, he just learned his daughter died.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, okay. Like as soon as Jesus says like it'll be fine, he's like, okay, it'll be fine. Like, I mean, he's still shaken up, but it was a very realistic interpretation of like what a person who believed in Jesus but was still having a hard time would react.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like he's like, no, she's dead. You can't do it anymore. Like he doesn't do any of that, but he also doesn't just like, oh, okay. Like it's like a very realistic, like, I'm going to follow you and I'm going to trust you.
Yeah.
But this is still hard.
Yeah.
Right. I thought that was cool. It's so they go into the house and you have like the flute players and like the mourners like, and then he tells them to stop. And if this isn't commentary on the social climate at the time, they just stop and like they're just like totally not engaged, and like you can tell that they're literally just hired workers.
Yeah.
Right. Like they genuinely do not care about what's going on. And I like what they're doing here because this is a very weird and confusing aspect of the story in the Gospels. Because whenever they get there and Jesus says that the little girl's asleep, it says that everybody laughed. And it's just kind of weird because when you read it, you're like, the girl's dead. Why are y'all laughing?
Yeah.
But this is a very good way of like portraying it because it's like it's the mourners and like the people, they're just hired workers. Like they're not actually invested in this. And whenever he says that they're asleep, he's like, whenever he says that she's asleep, they're just like, no, she's not. Like, what are you talking about?
Why would
like,
we be here?
Yeah, like they're like, you haven't even been here. Like, we've been here. We've been hired. We know better than you. And so they're laughing at like him being almost like stupid or something. And I like how Jesus just like walks in and he's just like using his authority, which we've seen more in this season probably than any of the other seasons so far, where he just like comes in and he's just like, his words alone are authoritative. So he comes in, he tells them to stop. He tells them to go away. They laugh at him, but he says, everyone get out. And he tells the boys to escort them out. I like that he called them the boys.
The boys.
The boys will escort y'all out. And so the boys do that. And then they go up into the room. They go upstairs. And the wife is freaking out. They mentioned her name. I don't remember it, but I'll rewatch it later and figure it out. But the wife is totally freaking out. She's accusing Jairus of everything. And like just been like, you weren't here and all that stuff. And he's like, calm down, honey. Like, to be fair, that'd be a very difficult thing to calm your wife down about. I mean, like, literally, you left her during her time of need to go get this Jesus guy who she doesn't know from Adam. And, like, your daughter died while you were gone. Like, that's not a good look.
Yeah.
But I can guarantee you that she loves him more than ever after this scene.
Yeah.
Because he says, just calm down. Let Jesus do this.
Yeah.
And so Jesus goes down. He kneels down. He uncovers the girl. And he touches her, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
And I was wondering what they were going to do here because this is one of those places where the scriptures actually record in Aramaic. Like it records like just literally an Aramaic like transcription basically of what he said. Because he said, Talitha kum, which means little girl, wake up. But they have him lean in and say, little lamb, wake up. And I forget the exact connection. I think that there's people who say that like whenever he says a girl there, it's like the word that could also refer to a little lamb or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But this is like an interpretation thing there. I was wondering if they were gonna like have him speak like Talitha kum and then like there'd be like subtitles. Which wouldn't have been necessary. That was just me like looking at the biblical story, be like, what are they gonna do?
Yeah.
But they did it really well. And I kind of liked how they had her wake up. Because it wasn't like, it was literally like she was waking up from sleep.
Yeah.
Like she just looked
like
groggy.
She was asleep.
Yeah, she was just like
stretching.
Yeah, she's like, Like, it's rolling. I'm like, what the heck?
It
And
was like a nap.
it's kind of funny because everybody else is like, oh my gosh. And like, she just kind of gets up and she's just like going along with it. She's like, yeah. And, like, it makes you wonder, like, did she know that she was dead? Like,
I don't know.
She knew she was sick, but she feels better now. And so she's happy. But I just like that she's like, she wake up like she's from sleep.
Well, yeah, and then the last time that she was awake, it was like just like her mom and dad. And now she wakes up. There's this guy at her bedside. Her mom and her dad. Her mom's crying. There's 3 random people.
Just like leaning into the back. That's true.
He's like, what went on while I was gone?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I do need to make this one comment right here because I didn't mention this. Jose says Simon grabs that one guy. I loved that. Like, that was great. Whenever Jesus says they're gonna escort the boys out, Simon just like manhandles this one dude. That was absolutely fantastic. I did love that. So that was a very funny.
Consistent with Simon's personality.
Yes. Okay, but so going forward, after he raises the girl up and everything, she gets up and everybody's rejoicing. But then Jesus says not to tell anybody, and he even turns to the 3 guys and he says, not even the others. Like, don't even tell them what you've seen here. Which is interesting, right? Like, why would you not tell the disciples? But that's what Jesus said.
Yeah.
And he explains to them, like to everybody, it's not yet for that commotion that will result. And he says that's for y'all as well, because like the commotion won't just come towards Jesus; it'll also be towards them, because everybody will like they'll want to like turn the girl into like like everybody wants to see the dead girl.
Yeah.
And so he's like, hey, just don't tell anybody about this. Which once again, like, how are you gonna get like people are gonna hear about it because they literally already hired mourners and stuff.
And the Pharisee.
But yeah, so it is kind of interesting there. But then Jairus comes up and he says, thank you. There are no other words. Thank you. Yeah. And what I like about Jairus is that he's just a man of few words, and like he's had so many words to say to everybody else, but when he's in Jesus' presence, he can just like mutter like few words. Yeah. I know you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I know you. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And he just like keeps repeating himself. It's almost like he's just like he's just in such awe of who he's in front of that all he can do is repeat himself, and it's just like simple words.
Yeah.
So once again,
cool.
I like Gaius. I mentioned Gaius. I blended Gaius and Jairus. That's funny. Yeah. Okay, and then we cut to Veronica, and she's cutting away. I'm assuming these are her undergarments. I'm guessing.
Yeah,
right?
In the bag that she would put stuff in.
Yeah, so she's cutting away that and ripping it off. I was surprised that she would do this like out on the street, which to be fair, there's nobody around. But I was just like, yeah, that's a choice to make. But
like an alleyway or something.
Yeah. And so she cuts that off, and then she goes and burns them. I don't know where she went into, but she just went somewhere and just threw the clothes in there.
Someone's house.
Well, yeah.
Like, it seems like they're like a patio, like
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's what's kind of confusing. Like, she just like walked past like a bunch of people. I was like, is this a person's house? Like, is this like a private residence? Like, are you just walking to a random person's place and like throwing into like it looked like a stove, like it was like a furnace thing.
Yeah.
But I was like, I hope that's not a stove. This is kind of nasty. Like, come on, like, is there not a better place to like throw this away? I don't know. But it's kind of funny. And then she goes off and she goes to like clean herself in the sea, I guess, right? Like she's dipping in to just be cleansed. Once again, the episode's called Clean. Real quick, I do want to thank you, Dwayne, for the $5. I appreciate it. He says, I never understood why the mourners laughed in scripture. They had professional mourners. It made more sense. No emotional attachment. Yeah. They were just hired hands, right? To where they were hired to mourn with them, but probably didn't have any emotional investment in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she goes and cleanses herself. And we're going to cut back to that in a little bit. But first, we have the Pharisee pronouncing Jesus unclean, which is just funny. Because Jesus, like, we know what just happened, and Jesus just doesn't feel like he doesn't feel like responding to this. And I like that. There's a principle behind that, right? Mm-hmm. Not everybody deserves a response.
Yeah.
And Jesus could defend himself. He could explain it. We would be tempted to do it. He doesn't do that. But he does turn to Yusuf, and this is where Yusuf just kind of looks away. Mm-hmm. He pulls a Nicodemus, right? To where it's like earlier, whenever they were in the privacy of Simon's residence, he nodded whenever Jairus mentioned like his, like, what he'd written.
Yeah. But
now it's like he's not willing to stand up for Jesus in front of this Pharisee.
Yeah.
Which is like crazy.
So close.
Yeah. And so the Pharisee dude threatens to write a letter to the Sanhedrin. I mistyped it there. Sanhedrin. He threatens to write a letter to the Sanhedrin, and this is where Jesus says, all right, who else either touched me or touched the bleeding woman and therefore is unclean? And all 3 of the disciples are like, we did. So basically, they're all saying, yeah, if you're going to write a letter about Jesus, you got to write a letter about us too. Because Jesus could defend himself and like say all this. He doesn't. He's just like, who else did it? And they're all like, yeah, we're going down with you, Rabbi. And then he's just like, all right, let's go. And so basically the implication is that they're going to go cleanse themselves because they'd be unclean until evening. And so they leave and they go cleanse themselves. But whenever they get there, they all just say like, yeah, they think we're here to clean ourselves off, but really we're just here to goof off in the water. Because
go for a swim.
They come across Veronica there, and
the whole posse's with them now.
Yeah, the whole posse.
It's not just the
because he says go get the other disciples, and so they're all just gonna have some water and have on the water, and they play chicken. Which is fun. I love a good game of chicken, but I will say they probably should have gone into deeper water.
I know.
Because, I mean, I was looking at some of them falling. I was like, you're going to get hurt.
I mean, even waist deep.
Yeah, I mean, luckily they're with Jesus, so he could just heal them. But like, yeah, I mean, like I always like every time I've played chicken, I'm like in like chest deep water.
Yeah.
Because if you fall, it's like that's not a big deal. But if you're like they're in like knee deep water, like there's like stones there, like boom, like it's gonna hurt. But looked like they were having a very fun time.
It did.
I'll be interested to see if like somebody has a problem with that. Like they're like Jesus never had fun.
He would never play in the water.
Yeah. I don't know. And then we cut to Eden watching. And this is the thing I talked about earlier where she just seems like really shaken up and like sad and sorrowful. Like, oh, I'm over here. Like, I don't know. I don't want to be too critical of her because I know she's going through stuff.
No, she is.
But to me, I think it just frustrates me. Well, like when people do this to themselves, if that makes, you know what I mean? Like, because I understand when people feel alone and like I hate that for people. Like I hate when people feel alone. They feel like they have no one they can talk to. But it really does frustrate me whenever people are actively trying to help, but then people choose to feel alone. You know what I mean? Because like Simon has reached out. Andrew has reached out, right? Like we've had multiple people reach out to her, yet she still seems like she's like, just like she's doing it to herself. And once again, that's just what humans do, right? It's not like me like trying to judge her. They're like, I've done this. We've all done this. It's just frustrating to me where it's like I have a harder time empathizing with her there because I realize she went through something very difficult. But her frustration at the world around her is primarily rooted in her own stubbornness. Right? Whereas like, yes, she is going through something alone, but she's the one making it to where she's going through it alone because she has so many people around her who would be willing to go through it with her. Right? All of the women would be willing to do it. Simon, Andrew, Jesus, but she hasn't talked to any of them about it. And so that's the thing that frustrates me because it's like you see it in her eyes and I'm just interested. I want to see what they're going to do with it because like, I hope that they do address. I don't really know how they would address it because whenever the truth does come out and she does explain it, it's probably going to be such a sensitive thing where I don't think there's really going to be any room for any sort of rebuke there.
Then it's not the time.
Yeah, because it really isn't the time, right? I mean, like any time of rebuke would almost have to be something that happened off screen, just because it wouldn't be like. You know, and Simon wouldn't be the one who's like Simon's not in the place to rebuke her, right? Because Simon, whenever he hears this, he just got to like empathize and be like, "I'm sorry, I didn't know," right? Like, really, the only person who could really rebuke her here is like Jesus, and it is something that really she has to come to understand on her own. But to me, it is kind of frustrating because I'm like, "Come on, just tell somebody, just please tell somebody. You don't have to go through that alone." But it is kind of difficult. But yeah, so there is episode number 5.
Yes.
And then episode 6, just quick preview we had there. John's disciples want to see Jesus. So we're going to see that, which is, I really like that part from the Gospels. And so I'm excited to see that. We see more stuff with Simon and Eden. We see stuff with Simon Z and the other zealot dude, which seem to be coming to a head. And then we have Gaius and the tent city thing. And Quintus is upset because I guess Atticus has been tattling on him. And he says that Gaius is failing with tent city. So I don't know where that's going to happen. And then, Gaius seems like he's going to take some action there as well, which will be interesting. But what are your final thoughts real quick just about the episode as a whole? And then I guess we can go through a lot of these comments and see what people have to say before we wrap this up.
I really like it. I thought it was good. And I think there's a lot of things that they can build off of with the coming episodes. And so I'm excited to see where the different storylines are going to go. So.
I think so too. I think there's a lot of really cool stuff here. The Simon and Eden things, I'm just really interested to see how they handle it because I I just want people to know, right? Like, come on, like I just want people to know
Yeah.
there. But yeah. All right, cool. So let's go back through, and there's so many comments here. I'm just honestly gonna pick some at random and just go through and just click some. Let's see. Let's see. Eeny, meeny, miny, boom. Is it possible that we could see more of the 2x2 mission by doing flashbacks, maybe in season 4? I don't think we have enough room for next coming episodes. I don't think they're going to return to that, honestly. I think we might hear more about the effects of it, because there's certain things that they've kind of teased. And I remember them talking about this, like, even prior to the season coming out. They said that there's going to be like certain bonds and certain things that how the people have been shaped from their mission, that we really haven't seen any effects of that. Like, so far we have seen very little about the effects of the 2x2. But I think we'll see more of that. I don't know if we're going to get any flashbacks though. Maybe, but I don't really necessarily see that. Let's see. Okay, but could they explore more of the backstory in season 4? Maybe. I don't know. It's just an idea, but I heard this. Okay. Let's see. Wait, hold up. The one comfort we have is that we're doing it together. Yes. That was, I think, in reference to us talking about the Eden and Simon thing. Yeah, I think that it's a lot easier to grieve when you're doing it together. I wonder too if she's feeling shame or guilt, because at that time people might see pregnancy as loss as punishment, whereas we now know it as a medical reason. Yeah, I mean, that's possible. We really, like, that's the issue. We don't know what's going on in Eden's head just because she hasn't told anybody.
Yeah, and it hasn't been given to the audience either.
Yeah, so all we can do is speculate, and really it's just communication is key. Like, you need to talk with people about stuff like this. And once again, this doesn't just go just for Eden. Like, the reason they're including this is because this is a dominating issue. And I think what they're trying to communicate is that this needs to be something people can talk about, right? Like, I think that's what they're trying to communicate through the show. They're using Eden as an example that you don't have to suffer alone.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's something that I wish for, like, some of the people that, like, we've known who've gone through this. Like, I wish they would have talked to me. Like, I knew about the first one, but then we learned that they'd had multiple since then, but they never told anybody about it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that sucks, honestly. Like, you have to go through that. No, like, talk with us. Like, we're your brothers and sisters in Christ. Like, let's grieve with you. And, like, you don't have to feel ashamed of it. It's not your fault. Like, let's go through this together. And I think that's what they're trying to communicate through this show. But it's just kind of frustrating. Like, I don't know. Like, I think that's why it's frustrating. Like, whenever I'm saying I'm frustrated with Eden, it's not that I'm frustrated, like, at her specifically. It's like I'm frustrated with, like, the idea of, like I don't even know how to word it, because there was almost a level of frustration with me towards, like, the people that were going through it. But it's not like a frustration of, like, oh, I'm so angry at you. It's like a frustrated, like, I want to grieve with you.
Yeah.
Like, let me know so that I can love you.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
well, that comes from, like, a root of almost like a sorrow that you feel for them.
Yeah. Like it's like almost like a compassionate frustration, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I'm talking about here. It's not like a frustration as in, like, how dare you? Yeah. Like, it's not that at all. It's like, come on, like, I get it's hard, but this episode was brilliant, heartfelt. Yep, absolutely. I feel so bad for Eden. If I were her husband, I would just hug and comfort her. Yeah, the miscarriage thing was just gut-wrenching. Yeah, I just really don't know what Simon could do. Because it seems like everything he's doing, like, the mindset that Eden's in right now, I don't think there's anything Simon could do that could satisfy her, right? Other than really just happening to guess the exact thing. But then I think that would even cause her to break down. I think genuinely it's just like almost she has to come to terms with it, and she needs to address it, because I don't think there's anything at this point that he could really do. Yeah. James says John is infuriating as of late, being totally serious. I think John is just being John. Like I said, I'm not as engaged in the James and John, like, conflict right now to see him as really annoying. I think they're just brothers kind of goofing off with one another. It almost sounds like Zebedee's midlife crisis. I know this. Okay, I am not even going to joke around. I thought the same thing. Whenever he's like, hey, I'm going to do my own thing, I was like, is Zebedee having a midlife crisis?
Yeah.
Because he was like, because they even had the scene where, like whenever he says, I'm getting old, and they're like, you're not old, Abba. Like, you're not old. But to me, I genuinely thought, like, yeah, midlife crisis for sure. That's funny. I think he was worried Z might be angry about Simon Peter talking with a Roman. Oh, okay. So, like, the concern. Okay, that's interesting. Let's see. When Judas was playing with the group, oh my gosh, this is, like, literally the first time that we see Judas portrayed that way, having fun. Yeah. Why not? I mean, I think it's good to show that. And I think it's also just relieving, like, just to have Jesus and the disciples having fun. Because, yes, they go through a lot of hard stuff, but I'm sure they did goof off sometimes. Let's see. The scene with the Pharisee asking Jesus if he was a necromancer made me laugh really hard. Yeah, because I mean, Jesus is like, no, I'm just a life giver. Completely agree with your thoughts on Tamar. So far, we haven't seen her be willing to sacrifice. Yeah, it's just interesting to me, like how much people justify her. I don't like Tamar. She needs to be humbled. I like Tamar. I don't want to say I don't like her. I just don't like what she's doing. I also love the link between Judas, the olive grove, and him counting the money in the end. Yeah. Well, yeah. The olive grove thing. I mean, Garden of Gethsemane is an olive press.
Yeah.
And then counting money, and they got down to 30%, right? So 30 coins. You know. Yeah, so that's interesting. I noticed people trying to make it a culture thing. This is talking about Tamar, and Mary needed to back off, but they're ignoring her explanation why she didn't want to give up her jewelry. Yeah, like Mary Magdalene was primarily getting onto her. Like she's like, that sounds like animism. Like that's like it's not just a culture thing. Like Mary explains, this is beyond cultural issues. Like this is adhering to a previous religion, and you're trying to like it's asynchronous basically. I like the boldness of Tamar. I like that she's a three-dimensional character. All the women are, even Veronica in this episode. Yeah, I mean, so far the stuff I'm seeing with Tamar, I'm not super impressed by, just because I think she has a lot to work through, and we're gonna see that in the next episode as well. We had like Tamar asking Mary, like, are we gonna be okay?
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if they're talking about like personal character stuff, or if like something about the olive grove thing is gonna like.
Oh, I've seen.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It might be too quick to have any like major ramifications for the olive grove, but I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, don't forget what the biological hormones of a woman post-pregnancy are doing. Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, that is 100% true. We are still always accountable for our actions, but there's definitely more going on inside of her than, just, like, I'm not a woman, obviously. I can't speak on behalf of that, but there is definitely more going on. Like, I'm not trying to say this is a simple issue, but I do think that no matter what, we are still accountable for our actions, and we do need to, I don't think we're ever justified at getting mad at somebody for something that they literally could not know about. I mean, that's the main issue there. Like, she's mad at Simon for something that he wants to know about. He just can't. I love the Simon and Gaius scenes. So cool to see them actually getting to know each other. Yeah, I think it's just cool. Like, Gaius just seems like a pretty open-minded dude, honestly. Like, it seems like Matthew really kind of broke him down a little bit. Where he's like, oh, these Jews aren't so bad.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, David, have you noticed that olive and olive oil is becoming integrated into the main storyline? First season had Quintus saying olive. Yeah. I think they're really good at just kind of like laying the groundworks for different things that are going to come back up later in the show, so that they don't have to explain it. Like whenever olive oil comes back into the show later on, well, you know what olive oil is. You're like, oh, okay. So that you're not having to have like these huge exposition dumps. Like they're incorporating it into the more fictional storylines so that you know what it is, so that when it comes back later, they're not having to like, well, in order for you to understand this biblical scene, we have to explain this. Because that's usually what we have to do in sermons, right? In a sermon, you're like, well, in order to understand this, I got to explain this, and this.
Yeah.
Well, they're using the fictional storylines to help explain that, so that later on, you're like, I remember that. Cool. Servant, son, boom. Yes. Let's see. By the way, imagine if Quintus heard about Gaius helping Simon work. Oh, I feel like Quintus would be so frustrated. He'd be like, yeah, especially because he doesn't like Simon, right? So it's funny. Let's see. I think it's two different stories because the response of the centurion and the son is different. Yeah, I do think that the stories in the Bible are different between the centurion, son, and servant. But I think that they'll find a good way of blending that. Or it seems like maybe they're at least hinting at that. Like it's just kind of like a nod to both of them. Let's see. That's why Gaius perhaps is willing to go down in the dirt to fix the broken cistern, not ordering someone else. Psychologically, it's like Gaius wants to fix the problem on his own. Yeah. Let's see. Simon Z saying he's back totally confused me too. They were all with Jesus at Eden's house. The timeline seems off. Maybe Jesus went away again. Yeah, I do think, just having talked about it earlier, I do think that particular scene, just that one, like, it was like, what, a 3-second scene?
Yeah.
Where Simon Z barges in the door. I think that probably was supposed to be in the last episode. To where it's daytime, he barges in there, says he's back, and then that would explain why all of them are with Jesus going into Simon's house later on. But I think that they just took that and threw it in there to kind of build up the excitement that goes with this. I think it just does kind of make some weird timeline issues there. Yeah, it should have been episode 4, not 5. Really bugged me timeline wise. Yeah, it's just little things like that which kind of just take me out of the show because I'm like, wait, what? That it just didn't make sense contextually, but it's not a super big deal. I never thought about it from the disciples' perspective, having given up everything and the fear that they might have when Jesus. Yeah, it'd be pretty terrifying if you're a disciple there. Polytheism and the shotgun approach. Pray to every god. Something I don't think we understand. Isn't as common today. Yeah, I mean, my favorite scene in Acts chapter 17 is whenever Paul is standing before the people in Athens, and he's like, "Hey guys, so I was walking around and I noticed that you have like statues to all your gods and altars to all your gods, and then I saw that you had one statue and altar to like an unknown god, just in case you missed one. Well, I'm here to tell you about that God, and he's the God of everything."
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's fun. Because he's kind of making fun of their culture a little bit, because it's like they literally have a statue. They're like, well, we have a God of water, fire, earth, all this stuff, but in case we forgot one, here's this. And it's just funny to me that they would actually have that, because it's like they're not very self-aware. But yeah. All right, let's see. Episode 2. Oh, I think this is a ranking. So episode 5 is your favorite. Episode 3, episode 2, episode 4. Oh gosh. Episode 5, 3, 2, 1. And my least favorite is episode 4, even though I thought it was good. It was kind of the weakest. Yeah, after the whole season's done, we'll do ranking videos and stuff like that. And yeah, it'll be cool. It feels like this will just suffice instead of the transfiguration scene, as Jesus says here to say nothing about it, yet after a miracle. Well, to be fair, Jesus says that a lot to people throughout the Gospels. Like, he's always saying, don't tell anybody about this. So I don't think they'll do the transfiguration. I think they might have like after it happens, we're like, oh my gosh. Yeah. But I don't know if they do that, because I don't even know how you would depict that in a show. And Dallas's voice that he doesn't want to do anything that'll like take people out of the show too much, like especially when it comes to special effects. Yeah. I don't even know how you depict that. In Jerusalem, there was a public place right outside David's city where things were burned. I suppose Capernaum could have something like that. Not a little hole. Oh, that's possible. Yeah, I mean, they had the Valley of Gehenna in Jerusalem, the place that Jesus always refers to as like hell, basically. Gehenna, like, it's a place where everything would be burned, just like a refuse area. So they did have that in Jerusalem, and I guess they could have something like that in Capernaum. So that could be what she threw her stuff in. Mm-hmm. To prove that he touched an unclean woman or corpse, they'd also have to admit he healed one and raised the other back to life. Very true. Very true. Mm-hmm. Let's see. You guys are cracking me up. They aren't in deep enough water to play chicken. Yeah, I mean, like, that's the stuff that I pay attention to when I watch The Chosen. I mean, you need to be very careful when you play chicken. Don't want anybody getting hurt, but I guess whenever you're with a guy who can raise people back to life, you're not too worried. You can just play extreme chicken. The concession Jesus makes to the Pharisee reminds me of the incident with the temple tax and Jesus saying, paying it to not offend them. Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing that Paul talks a lot about that. Like, just don't offend people. Just go along with it. Be a Jew amongst the Jews, Gentile amongst the Gentiles. I just checked that some sites mentions that Talitha in Greek means little girl, damsel, while in Aramaic it says little lamb. I want to know your take in your Is It Biblical series. Okay, we'll see. I'll try to do some research on that for sure. Miscarriage is such a mystery and hard to deal with because it's nobody's fault. They just, that's one of the it's hard to respond to too, and sometimes we just kind of downplay it. That's why people are afraid to talk about it usually, because we don't treat it like a death. But that was something whenever whenever our friends first got pregnant for the first time before the miscarriage happened, like, I said, I was like, you're a father. And he was like, well, I will be. And he was like, oh, I am. Because even in the womb, I was like, you're a father. You just, like, we don't typically think of it that way, right? Like, we talk, like, as Christians, we talk about babies as being human beings, but we don't treat it like that. And whenever a miscarriage happens, we almost like treat it like it's like anathema, and like we just don't talk about it. It's like taboo. But to me, it's like, if we're being consistent, and if we believe that is a living being in the womb, then whenever a miscarriage happens, that is a death, and we should treat it like a death. And that's sad. And so, yeah, it's hard to react to, but to me, miscarriages are sometimes even sadder than normal death, because it's like, this child never even had a chance to know life, and you never got a chance to meet this loved one, right? Like, you had all this time building up the anticipation of it, and you never actually got to meet him or her, and like, to me, that's even more heartbreaking. And so to me, it's almost even worse than normal grieving, because at least whenever you're normally grieving, you have memories to reflect on with the person. And, like, that's like, whenever people die at funerals, that's what you do, right? You go to the funeral and you reflect on their life. But with a miscarriage, you don't have anything to reflect on. And so, like, I feel like we should really be there for people like that. But we just, as Christians, we need to step up our game. The whole aspect of miscarriage is seen in those times a sin issue, though not. Yeah. Did I miss something? Did she have a miscarriage? I thought she was just upset with Peter over lack of quality time. Well, no, yeah. So she had a miscarriage in the first scene. Like that was her having the miscarriage. I'd be careful expecting someone to come out of depression. It's an illness, and Eden is caused by hormonal bouts. Yeah, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time, we do have to understand that people still need to be accountable for their actions. Like, yes, I agree that she is going through stuff, but we need to also, we can't let things like that excuse how we treat other people, because that's a very slippery slope, right? Like, I know that I should have been behaving in a godly and loving way, but then we begin to make excuses. Yes, from an outsider's perspective, we need to be compassionate towards those people, and we need to be loving, and we need to be gracious with them, and we shouldn't expect perfection of them. I'm more speaking from Eden's perspective and like personal accountability, if that makes sense. That's why I'm saying like a rebuke, there's not really room for a rebuke there, because it's like from an outsider's perspective, you got to be compassionate towards her situation. But from an internal perspective, she shouldn't allow this to be an excuse to be angry and hateful towards other people. If that kind of makes sense. I know that it's kind of a tricky thing to explain there, but yeah. Here's what I'm wondering. If Eden had this problem for days, why doesn't she just tell Jesus about that? I mean, the Son of God's right in front of you. Because I think that she's having a tough time with trusting Jesus right now, too. I think we saw that last episode where she's like, things have changed. A lot of time's passed since then. I think she's having a tough time following Jesus. Because Jesus is the reason why Simon wasn't there to go with, like, that's the issue. Like, to me, it's very similar to the woman yelling, like, Jairus' wife yelling at him, right? You weren't there with me whenever our child died. Eden's going through the same thing, right? You weren't there with me. And the reason Simon wasn't there with him is for the same reason Jairus wasn't there with him. It's because of Jesus, right? And so, to me, there's a very nice parallel there, right? Like the reason she's mad, like, she's not just mad at Simon. She's mad at the world, I think. She's mad at Jesus. She's mad at God. She's mad at everybody. The situation. And it's not easy. Because, but that's part of following Jesus, right? Like, there's going to be times like that happens. She might be thinking she's punished. That's possible. I don't know. Funny that Judas didn't know that olive trees were dying. A callback to episode 1 where he tells his sister that he can't keep his plant alive. Oh, that's funny. That is true. I thought it was interesting how Eden perked up when Jesus was teaching about the new wine and old wineskins and how a lot of old structures are going to be changed. Yeah, I noticed that she did at least act a little more normal there, but I didn't really know how to interpret it. Let's see. And the last thing I'm going to say, I'm so excited to see the Feeding the 5,000 last episode. I have a feeling it could be the longest episode. I don't know, just a guess. Episode 8 could be the best. I don't know. We'll see. We'll have to see. Let's see. I'm just skipping through these. I'm not going to every comment because it's already almost been 2 hours and I am tired. Unrelated, I mentioned the last stream that this show has changed me from an atheist to agnostic. Little update. I pray that if Jesus would reach out to me, I would listen. Then out of the blue, I received a Bible quote message on Messenger from someone I've never met that felt like I was having my mind read. That's awesome, Josiah. That is so cool. Very odd phrase. Well, Josiah, that is really, really cool. I would love to know what passage that they sent you. That's just that's neat. That's awesome. I hope to know more about that. Keep us updated because I pray that you will come to believe in Christ. Right? I mean, I think that it would be a great decision. I wonder if in ancient Israel, a woman who had a miscarriage was facing shame akin to Veronica. I think that is for sure a thing. I mean, we have to recognize that we don't handle it well now, but I think they probably handled it even less well back then because a lot of times they did associate stuff like that with sin and punishment. And so there probably is an element of like a cultural aspect of shame that might be keeping her from sharing that with Simon as well. But yeah, I'm trying to be gracious to my dad and my half siblings while mourning my mom, but it's hard. Just try your best. And you've mentioned your mom on here before, and I'm sorry that you're having to go through that, but be gracious. You can't control how other people treat you, and you can't control their actions, but you can control how you respond. And we are just called to be gracious and loving towards them, even if they do wrong. But I think that's going to be it for today. And I think we should wrap this up. Sounds good. You have any final comments you want to make about the episode? Anything like that?
I don't think so.
All right. Cool. Well, guys, we are going to sign out for today. Thank you for joining us on this live stream. I will have more videos coming to y'all. I do want to apologize. I did not end up doing a scene analysis for this last week, mainly because, first off, my schedule was busy because the school started again and I've got classes to teach. And I'm pressed for time when it comes to making these videos. And so I was trying to come up with 3 videos a week in addition to this live stream. I don't know if I'll be able to keep that up while the season is going. I will try to go back and do more scene analysis stuff like in between seasons and everything. But just be patient with me. I'm going to try to at least get out my episode breakdowns and my Is It Biblicals while the season's going. And then I'll try to do more stuff later. If I get scene analysis stuff out, cool. But no promises there, just because things are a bit busier. And I don't want to only be working on this stuff because I do want to spend time with Brienne and my Bible study people and my family. And I do want to have time for that because it doesn't do any good to just be focused on ministry whenever you have all these other people around you that also need to be loved and cared for. And, like, I love y'all, but I don't know y'all as much, And so I just want to let y'all know, just be patient with me there. I will hopefully make more videos and stuff like that sometime later. But for now, we're going to tune out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to those other videos. If you haven't subscribed so far, please do that because I actually was looking at the analytics and I think it only says like 30% of the people who watch my videos are subscribed.
Oh, wow.
So go on there, subscribe. Like if you're watching, why aren't you subscribed? Come on, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so you know when videos like this are coming your way. And also, if you don't mind, please just like hit that like button for me because that is also really helpful for just kind of getting stuff out there. And yeah, so my name is David.
And my name is Brienne.
And this has been Now Let's Be Honest. Be sure to keep a smile on your face. Don't let anybody steal your joy. And we will see y'all next time. Have a great night and happy 8th day of the year.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.